Chapter 751. The rainbow butterfly banshee was just an ordinary butterfly at first, but the place she lived in was far from ordinary. Nine Heaven's realm, Immortal Palace's back garden. This was a courtyard personally taken care of by the Immortal Empress. During the golden age of the Immortal Tao, this place was filled with flowers and butterflies. Immortals played all day long. Clearly, the butterflies and insects that lived here were all lucky. Besides the overflowing fragrance of immortal chi, there were also female immortals, and even the voices of the immortal mother occasionally speaking about the Tao. Insects and butterflies that had just gained sentience began to slowly accumulate. However, as they were the lowest level of life, it was extremely difficult for them to gain sentience and attain the first level of cultivation. Unless they had a fortuitous encounter, it was extremely difficult for them to truly embark on the path of cultivation. The rainbow butterfly banshee was one of the lucky ones. Once she landed on the immortal queen's finger, and the latter remarked, "This butterfly is so beautiful. If it were to cultivate into a human form, it would probably be devastatingly beautiful." That simple statement gave the butterfly banshee a huge amount of luck. However, from that day onwards, the butterfly banshee never saw the immortal queen again. Although the garden was still filled with flowers and fairies, the immortal queen never showed up again. The butterfly banshee couldn't figure out either. It was from that day onwards that she began to officially embark on the path of cultivation. However, the path was extremely difficult. It was not until the great tribulation of the immortal Tao that she gained some cultivation. However, she still could not even take human form. Back then, she found a unique path and escaped from the Nine Heavens realm. Due to her timid and cautious nature, she ended up hiding in Middle-earth for 2,000 years. After cultivating for more than 2,000 years, her cultivation had naturally improved a lot. Although she had not mastered many spells, they were superior in terms of purity. Moreover, she had never told anyone that she came from the Nine Heavens Xian world. Although she had lived in seclusion for the past 2,000 years, she had experienced many things and seen many people. Among them, there were plenty of so-called experts, but none of them could tell where she came from. Lin Jin was the first. For the rest of the conversation, young Master Zhou and Appraiser Tan had no idea what was going on. Lin Jin and the butterfly demoness continued their conversation. Basically, it was Lin Jin asking questions and she answering. Lin Jin's curiosity was piqued. It wasn't easy for him to meet someone who used to live in the Nine Heavens Immortal Palace, so he obviously had to get to the bottom of this and satisfy his curiosity. Meanwhile, the rainbow butterfly banshee didn't dare to ignore Lin Jin's question. She was completely intimidated by Lin Jin's aura. Even if it was something secretive, she would answer his questions without hesitation. Lin Jin asked about the Sky Luo Golden Pill. This was what Lin Jin wanted the most at the moment. It was also a must-have for Xiaohua to evolve into a rank 8 pet beast. In the end, it was just a casual question. He didn't expect the butterfly demoness to really know. Not only did she know, but she had also seen it with her own eyes. It was in the Immortal Queen Garden. It turned out that in the past, during some festivals in the Immortal Palace, the various immortals would come to the Immortal Queen's garden to congratulate her. How could they not bring gifts when they came to visit the Immortal Queen? This included the Tian Luo Golden Pill. Moreover, within the Immortal Back Garden, there were quite a few of these Heaven Net Golden Pills. Just for what the butterfly demoness knew, there was at least an entire porcelain bottle. There were at least 5 Heaven Net Golden Pills inside. Upon hearing this, Lin Jin was overwhelmed with excitement. But then he remembered that the Immortal Queen's garden was in the Nine Heavens world. Even if he had the Heaven Net Golden Pill, he wouldn't be able to get there. But then, he learned from the butterfly demoness that there was a way to enter the Nine Heavens world. This made Lin Jin's heart beat faster. Previously, he could spy on the Nine Heavens world and even reap benefits from it. But while it seemed right before his eyes, it was actually extremely far away. Entering it was as difficult as a mortal trying to ascend to heaven. But now, the butterfly demoness mentioned a way to directly enter the Nine Heavens world, the Immortal Palace, or even the Immortal Queen's Garden. This would save him a lot of trouble. Lin Jin would be lying if he said he wasn't tempted. At once, a thought popped into Lin Jin's mind. Enter the Nine Heavens world, enter the immortal Queen's Garden, and obtain the Heaven Net Golden Pill. With that, Xiaohu would definitely be able to evolve into rank 8. If that was the case, he would only be one step away from rank 9. The temptation was too great. Even if there was only a sliver of a chance, Lin Jin couldn't give up. Even if he had to take a huge risk, Lin Jin had to take this gamble. The benefits were so great that he couldn't refuse them. I have to try. Lin Jin made up his mind. But before that, he had to plan something. Since he was going to stay in the royal capital for a month, he might as well use this month to plan and prepare well. He had to be prepared. There were too many restrictions in the Immortal Palace. Even if there were no immortals guarding the place, they would still be in effect even after 2,000 years. If he wasn't careful, he could trigger them. This was an immortal palace. Lin Jin had a feeling that his mortal body wouldn't be able to withstand it. More importantly, Lin Jin was afraid that he would find the wrong place just by listening to the butterfly demoness instructions. It would be best if she could lead the way. For Xiaohu to evolve into rank 8, other than the Heaven Net Golden Pill, he would need other things. Lin Jin had to prepare them. Before he knew it, Lin Jin had already formulated a plan for Xiaohu's evolution. After leaving the Zhou family's manor, Lin Jin was obviously in a good mood. Although the butterfly demoness was extremely reluctant to lead the way to the immortal palace garden, she didn't dare to reject Lin Jin's request, so she agreed. Although Lin Jin sympathized with this pair of unfortunate lovebirds, he wouldn't hesitate when it was time to be ruthless. Just in case, Lin Jin even left a needle in her body. In the event that the butterfly demoness ran away out of fear, Lin Jin could get her back at once. Of course, to appease the other party, Lin Jin promised to extend young Master Zhou's life by giving him a reward. In other words, young Master Zhou wouldn't last more than a year. Based on his previous condition, young Master Zhou wouldn't last more than a year. Lin Jin told the butterfly demoness that if she helped, he could extend young Master Zhou's life by 10 years. The difference between 1 year and 10 years was obvious. Hence, for this reason, the butterfly demoness had no choice but to agree to Lin Jin's request. As for how Lin Jin was going to achieve this, it wasn't difficult at all. He just needed to cultivate a higher level of blood contract. In other words, he didn't need to reverse life and death, nor did he need to defy the laws of nature. He just needed to reverse the blood contract. In other words, the butterfly demoness would be the main force while young Master Zhou would be the support. No one else knew about this blood contract method or had even heard of it, but Lin Jin did. However, this method only treated the symptoms and not the root of the problem. Still, it was at least 10 times better than what the butterfly demoness was using. This was Lin Jin's best effort. Had it been any other true immortal, they wouldn't have been able to come up with a better solution. Chapter 752. Discovering the butterfly banshee had given Lin Jin a shortcut. A shortcut that could shorten Xiaohu's evolution time. A shortcut that could allow him to soar to the skies. Lin Jin knew that the butterfly banshee was a crucial link in this matter, and he couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Hence, Lin Jin needed to control her completely. Using spells wasn't a safe bet. As for using coercion, it was also a huge drawback. What Lin Jin needed was sincere help. A few days later, Lin Jin went to look for the butterfly banshee again and brought her into the unending nature painting alone. The butterfly banshee had never seen this before, so she gasped in amazement. Lin Jin had told Xu Xiao Lu that they would be transported to the 100th level of the origin painting. The butterfly banshee's shock was indescribable when she saw the Nine Heavens world. But because she was familiar with the Immortal Palace, she soon realized that it wasn't real. Although the Immortal Palace isn't real, the Immortal Queen, Xian Xuanzi, is real. After Lin Jin said a meaningful sentence, Xu Xiao Lu sent them into the depths of the origin painting world. From here, they could see a celestial mountain in front of them. Moving forward, they could see the silhouette of a woman sitting somewhere on the celestial mountain. It was Xian Xuanzi's silhouette. Xian Xuanzi was the immortal queen's name. Lin Jin didn't say a word as he wanted to see the butterfly banshee's reaction. If she used to frequent Immortal Garden, she must be very familiar with the immortal queen. Even if she only saw her silhouette, she would be able to recognize her. If she couldn't recognize her after seeing her silhouette, then what the butterfly banshee said might not be true. On the other hand, her words would be much more believable. Lin Jin wasn't disappointed. When the butterfly banshee saw Xian Xuanzi's silhouette, she recognized him immediately and knelt down in reverence. However, Xian Xuanzi couldn't sense her because everything in front of them was simulated by Xu Xiaolu. They didn't see Xian Xuanzi's silhouette. This way, it would be safer to avoid any unexpected trouble when the time comes. Then, the silhouette changed and they left the unending nature painting. I was in the painting realm just now. This painting was personally drawn by Xian Xuanzi, and I, Lin Jin, am the new owner of this unending nature landscape. In other words, I'm considered Xian Xuanzi's successor. It's only right and proper for me to go to Immortal's Garden to retrieve the celestial golden pill, Lin Jin said with a righteous expression. The butterfly demoness was already fearful of Lin Jin's supernatural powers and strength to begin with. Now that she witnessed this scene, the doubts and dissatisfaction in her vanished into thin air. She was indebted to the Immortal Queen, and the Immortal Queen Garden belonged to her. Since Appraiser Lin had inherited the Immortal Queen's heritage, it wouldn't be a big deal for him to take something out. The reason why the butterfly demoness immediately believed it was because Lin Jin said Xian Xuanzi. Not many people knew the Taoist name of the immortal empress back then. It could even be said that very few people knew it. The colorful butterfly demoness knew it because she accidentally saw the words inscribed by the immortal empress in the Immortal Empress Garden, and the name Xian Xuanzi was written behind it. Only then did she find out about this matter. This time, she no longer dared to have any doubts. Lin Jin had achieved his goal. Although it was a little despicable, Lin Jin had no other choice in order to achieve his goal. Also, Lin Jin felt that Xian Xuanzi and Xian Xuanzi should be on good terms since the latter was the one who saved him back then. Hence, it made sense for Lin Jin to try to establish this relationship with her. Now that the butterfly demoness was done, all he had to do was enter the Nine Heaven Realm. Days passed and Lin Jin made a trip to the Jade Dragon Lair. After all, he had to fulfill his promise to He Qian, and that was to find some good seedlings in the Jade Dragon Lair to promote these pet beasts to rank 5. With this, He Qian could use this batch of rank 5 pet beasts to win the hearts of the people. At the same time, the Jade Dragon Kingdom would have a batch of rank 5 pet beasts. With this, the Jade Dragon Kingdom would have one of the prerequisites to become a premium country. As for the other condition, Lin Jin had to gain the approval of at least 3 premium countries. Of course, the more, the better. This was actually a difficult task. But after He Qian sent out invitations to the premium countries, almost all of them responded quickly, stating that they were willing to come to the Jade Dragon Kingdom for the ceremony. The fact that they were willing to come spoke volumes. Only by showing their support and approval would they show up. Otherwise, they wouldn't even bother with the Jade Dragon Kingdom. Things were progressing smoothly, and He Qian was very satisfied. Every day, the Jade Dragon Kingdom took a firm step towards becoming a premium country. Finally, the day of Jade Dragon Kingdom's ascension to a premium country had arrived. He Qian woke up early to prepare. In fact, he hadn't slept since last night. No emperor of an intermediate country would be able to sleep on a day like this. A premium country. Finally, He Qian, have led the Jade Dragon Kingdom back to being a premium country. Ancestors of the He family, your descendant, He Qian, has not brought disgrace to your ancestors. He Qian was in high spirits. There was even a hint of a tear in his eye. Sometimes he would mumble to himself, and sometimes he would walk briskly in deep thought. It was clear how He Qian was feeling right now. Today, the Jade Dragon Kingdom's royal city was decorated with lanterns and streamers. The city gates were wide open and the streets were bathed in clean water. The city seemed spotless. Prince Feng Ziqian of Heavenly Jade Kingdom has arrived. A messenger came running in to report. Upon hearing this, Heqian quickly straightened his face. He tidied his clothes and sat on his throne before saying, "Invite Prince Heavenly Jade in." Having said that, he turned to the door and saw a ceremonial officer leading a few people in. Leading them was obviously Prince Heavenly Jade, Feng Ziqian. The latter looked excited. When he saw Heqian, he hurried forward and bowed. "Your Majesty, Feng Ziqian is here on Emperor Heavenly Jade's orders to congratulate the Jade Dragon Kingdom on its ascension to a premium country." Feng Ziqian was very respectful. He was treating Heqian as the ruler of a premium country. "Great! Welcome to the Jade Dragon Kingdom, Ziqian." Heqian was excited and happy at the same time. Just as they were done here, another messenger said, "Princess Ruoli of the Thousand Island Country has come with a gift to congratulate you." It was yet another top-tier country. Heqian knew that the marriage between Princess Ruoli of the Thousand Island Country and Prince Heavenly Jade, Feng Ziqian, was highly likely for these two premium countries to support the Jade Dragon Kingdom. Now, it seemed like this was the case. Heqian didn't dare to slight the princess of the Thousand Island Country, so he sent someone to welcome her politely. Following that, many more guests arrived. However, they weren't from premium countries. They were all intermediate and small countries. Clearly, their statuses couldn't compare to those of premium countries, but Heqian still welcomed them with a smile. Chapter 753. Heqian didn't panic. He wasn't worried that no one would come to Jade Dragon City to support him either. Only, with Lin Jin around, forget the large countries that received invitations. Even those that didn't would most likely show up. Heqian had even discussed this matter with the ministers in the royal court. They were all core officials of Jade Dragon Kingdom, and each of them was highly intelligent. Their knowledge of strategy was incomparable to that of the average person. In the end, they unanimously agreed that Lin Jin's status in Middle-earth had reached a terrifying height. If his previous reputation was just an empty one, then the fact that he single-handedly defeated the allied army of the 5 countries of Grassy Continent, to the point where they didn't even dare to retaliate, was a terrifying feat. Contemporary immortals weren't just empty words. Just this fact alone was enough for the Jade Dragon Kingdom to send out an invitation card, and no one would reject it. And, just as expected, more premium countries arrived one after another. The entire Jade Dragon City was bustling with noise and excitement. Interestingly, if it were any other country, they would definitely be nervous to have so many foreign dignitaries and armies in the city. They might even be worried that something might go wrong. After all, no one was to be trifled with. But in Jade Dragon City, there were no such concerns. No matter how arrogant a person was, be it the king or the dignitaries, they were all as obedient as good citizens in Jade Dragon City. Because no one dared to cause trouble here, especially since they now knew that Lin Jin was in the city. The story of him reviving a ferocious beast from the dead had already spread to everyone's ears after hundreds of versions. With this, Lin Jin's reputation grew even more famous. Of course, there were no absolutes in this world. Although most people respected and feared Lin Jin, there were a few who didn't believe it. A travel-worn group was currently resting in an inn in the Jade Dragon Kingdom. Judging by their attire and accessories, it was obvious that they weren't ordinary people. Each of them was well-built and had a ferocious aura that only came from Middle-earth. Even the horses they were riding weren't your average horses. At least, they had never been seen in Middle Continent before. Of course, the innkeeper of this inn had never seen them before. Out of curiosity, he couldn't help but steal a few glances at them. However, the innkeeper didn't have a good temper. He immediately cursed and was about to hit him. In the end, the young shopkeeper was not careless and was not afraid at all. "Since you're guests, you should abide by the rules of our Jade Dragon Kingdom. Didn't you see the sign at the city gates saying no trouble when you entered? Are you trying to break the rules?" The shopkeeper was quite polite at first, but these people's curses were a little unpleasant, so his temper flared up. Even if they were guests from afar, the people of Jade Dragon City were confident in their own rights. Hence, they wouldn't tolerate their insults. Again, they felt that they had a backer. Their backer was appraiser Lin. Everyone knew about this. During this period of time, they had seen quite a number of foreigners. Even if they were officials or nobles, they were polite to the Jade Dragon citizens. They did not dare to order them around, much less scold them. Hence, they felt a sense of pride and satisfaction. Simply put, the Jade Dragon Kingdom was hospitable and polite, but they would never indulge the other party or allow them to throw a tantrum. Hearing the shopkeeper's words, the person opposite immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. How dare a mere innkeeper speak to His Highness like that? How insolent! As he spoke, a ball of fire surged out from behind him. A flaming serpent appeared and pounced at the shopkeeper. This flaming serpent wasn't to be underestimated. It was at least rank 3 and had a fire attribute. Wherever it passed, it would burn. If the shopkeeper were to get entangled by this flaming serpent, he would immediately be incinerated and his life would be in danger. This person's attack was clearly too ruthless, wanting to take someone's life. Seeing this scene, even his companions were shocked. "You can't do this." Someone tried to stop the shopkeeper, but it was too late. Boom! The flaming serpent had another ability, and that was detonation. In an instant, the inn was engulfed in flames. With a loud explosion, many of the buildings were caught up in it. Smoke and dust billowed as the group of people hurriedly retreated outside. All of them looked grim. "This is bad." The leader of the group looked grim as he spoke. A tall man next to him immediately said, "Your Highness, I don't think there's any need to worry." This lowly commoner was the one who was rude first. "We're in the right no matter where we go. Moreover, even if we're in the wrong, what's wrong with killing a few ignorant commoners? Unless the Jade Dragon Emperor dares to use force against us?" The tall man looked nonchalant. Then, he turned to the person who attacked earlier and said, "Little brother, you did a good job. Ever since we arrived in Jade Dragon City, I've been suppressing my anger. No matter what, we're all members of the royal family of a premium country. Moreover, your Highness is of noble status and could very well inherit the throne. Yet this Jade Dragon Kingdom didn't even welcome us outside the city. Nobody even bothered to greet us after we entered the city. This is outrageous." His words naturally garnered the agreement of many of his companions as they echoed endlessly. Meanwhile, the prince clearly agreed with his guard leader's words. Indeed, he was also suppressing his anger. Everything else aside, he was a dignified prince of a premium country. His status was higher than that of an intermediate country's emperor. Yet, he had to stay in such a lowly inn. It was obvious that the prince was looking down on him. He had been suppressing his anger for 2 reasons. 1, he didn't want to cause trouble, and 2, it was because of Lin Jin. However, his subordinates were all hot-tempered and on the verge of exploding. As a prince, he couldn't possibly reprimand them. No matter what, he had already done it, so he had to carry it on. This was related to his dignity, and it was also related to the dignity of the country he belonged to. "Although you've gone overboard in this matter, you did it for me. Killing 2 commoners is fine, and I'll bear the consequences for you. But you mustn't let your emotions affect your decisions in the future. After all, this is Jade Dragon Kingdom, and that Lin Jin is here too. He's not to be trifled with," the prince warned. The group quickly saluted. "Your Highness, speaking of which, is that Lin Jin really a living god like the rumors say? I thought it was an exaggeration. In fact, how could there be any immortals in this world? That's utter nonsense. Moreover, the fact that he single-handedly defeated the allied army of the grassy continent's 5 countries is an exaggeration. In my opinion, this Jade Dragon Kingdom has the support of the Spiral Nation, and the one who defeated the grassy continent's 5 countries is most likely the Spiral Nation as well. As for Lin Jin, he should be a capable beast appraiser, but he's definitely not as godlike as the rumors say. Even without his beast appraising skills, his strength might not be on par with mine," the tall man suddenly said, his tone filled with suspicion and disdain. Chapter 754. This burly man had a rank 5 pet beast, and it could be said to be the strongest among all rank 5 pet beasts. That was why he was so arrogant. Even in their kingdom, he was the #1 expert. The one who attacked earlier was his younger brother. His younger brother had always relied on his influence to do whatever he wanted, but after being slighted in Dragon City, he couldn't hold it in anymore and revealed his true nature. It was their habit to be fearless. With His Highness's protection and their kingdom's #1 expert, no one dared to provoke them, not even nobles. As for the other kingdoms, they didn't even think much of them, not even their emperors. Moreover, we didn't do anything to Dragon City's royalty or nobles this time. We've come all the way here as guests, and we didn't do anything to Lin Jin either, so they wouldn't dare to do anything to us. The tall man sneered. He had clearly thought things through. Even if they were to kill, they would only kill commoners of the lowest rung. So what if Lin Jin found out? Let's go. After killing someone, these people wanted to leave as if nothing had happened. However, Dragon Kingdom had its laws, its government, and its patrols. The commotion earlier had already caught the attention of the patrols nearby. Now that someone had reported the murder, patrols from all over immediately rushed over. However, judging by the powerful and imposing aura of these people, it was obvious that they were nobles from another country. Dealing with them was tricky. Regular patrols didn't dare to approach them. When the city guards arrived, they ordered them to stop. His Highness couldn't be bothered with these soldiers. He had one of his subordinates step forward and show them his identification. Upon seeing it, one of the city guards captains felt a headache coming on. His Highness's Highness from a premium country. They couldn't afford to offend him. Dragon Kingdom was only an intermediate country and had yet to be promoted. Even if they were promoted, they would only be on the same level as this man. They definitely couldn't afford to offend or neglect a guest like this. But the problem was this man had killed someone in the city. Hence, while they couldn't afford to offend him, they couldn't let him go either. Why aren't you moving? Seeing that the soldiers of the Dragon army had no intention of retreating, the subordinate was unhappy and questioned coldly. The city guard captain immediately felt pressured, but he knew he couldn't back down now. If these people really caused trouble and killed someone, he would be in deep trouble if he let them go. Moreover, he didn't like foreigners like them coming to Dragon City to cause trouble. Be it for public or private reasons, he couldn't let them go. However, the city guard captain also knew that the other party had many experts. If they were to force their way in, they wouldn't be able to stop them at all. All he could do now was stall for time and wait for reinforcements to arrive. Thus, he deliberately looked at the damaged inn and said, "Everyone here is an honored guest, so we should treat you with courtesy. But I wonder what exactly happened here just now?" Using questioning to stall for time was also a good idea. Unexpectedly, the other party said coldly, "You're just a lowly soldier who isn't even a lieutenant. How dare you ask us questions? Get out of the way, or you'll have to bear the consequences." He was clearly used to being rude and unreasonable. The city guard captain's expression darkened, but he sneered inwardly. Still unhurriedly, he said, "If you think my rank is insignificant, just wait for a moment. Our general will be here soon." He wasn't spouting nonsense. This was a critical time. The emperor had personally ordered all military officers to wear armor and patrol the city with the city guards. He had already sent someone to inform the higher-ups earlier, so he believed a high-ranking official of the city would be here soon. The group of people on the other side were stunned when they heard this. How did things get out of hand? This wasn't what they expected. Just then, another person came over and said to the city guard captain, "Young man, our brothers here were a little impatient when they talked to you earlier, but this is just a small matter. Why do you have to make things difficult for us? Here, take this silver and have a drink with us." Having said that, he handed over some silver. However, the city guard captain didn't take it. He wouldn't be able to spend it even if he took it. "Everyone, please wait a moment." Seeing the other party's stubbornness, the hot-tempered man with the flaming serpent was infuriated again. "You insolent fool. Our lord is an honored guest invited by your Dragon Emperor. How dare you deliberately make things difficult for him? I think you must be tired of living." As he spoke, the flaming serpent behind him moved again. But this time, it was stopped by its elder brother, the tall, burly man. Clearly, the situation was different between dealing with the city guards of Royal City and dealing with some commoners. Dealing with commoners was easy, but it wasn't the same when dealing with a regular army. One wrong move, and things could get out of hand. Although the tall man despised the Jade Dragon Kingdom from the bottom of his heart, he despised their emperor and even despised Lin Jin, who had recently risen to fame in Heartland. Still, he would try his best not to provoke them out of nowhere. If something really happened, it would be difficult to clean up the mess. After stopping his younger brother, the tall man said, "All right, we'll wait for your general to arrive. It's not a big deal anyway, so why make it so tense?" With that said, both sides stopped fighting. However, the atmosphere remained tense as more and more commoners gathered around them. There were also survivors in the inn earlier, and now things were starting to get heated up. The voices of discussion grew louder and louder. Naturally, the people of the royal capital were now united against a common enemy. They began cursing the foreign troops for being tyrannical and killing people indiscriminately. This was how the people were. Right was right and wrong was wrong. Moreover, they were straightforward and wouldn't beat around the bush. Perhaps they might be wary of their own country's dignitaries, but now that they were dealing with foreign dignitaries, it had nothing to do with them and they weren't afraid of them. Hence, the accusations and curses grew louder. Their lord and the others were livid. No one could remain calm in such a situation. Moreover, as more people gathered, they began to feel nervous. Earlier, they thought it was a trivial matter. Even if they killed a few people, they believed the Jade Dragon Kingdom wouldn't hold them accountable. But things are different now that public opinion was involved. They might be forced to act against them. This wasn't a good thing. A bunch of insignificant commoners, Wei Chong. His Highness ordered in a low voice. The Wei Chong he mentioned was the tall man, the #1 expert of their premium country. The latter knew what he had to do. He had to release his pet beast to intimidate Jade Dragon Kingdom. Others might not be able to do this, not even with a rank 5 pet beast. But Wei Chong was an exception because his pet beast was very special. Chapter 755. Wei Chong's name was actually quite well known. He was born in the military and killed people like scything flax. For the first 30 years of his life, he lived a life of blood and sabers. If nothing went wrong, he would end up like his companions, dying on the battlefield and buried in the wilderness. Years later, he would be washed out by the rain, becoming a skeleton that no one could recognize. But sometimes, luck would change for the better. Wei Chong's luck changed during a battle. His original pet beast had died in battle, and the situation was extremely unfavorable. Wei Chong and his team probably wouldn't last until nightfall. It was then that Wei Chong and his team discovered an underground tomb. Under normal circumstances, ancient tombs were dangerous and were considered inauspicious. Unless there were any special circumstances, ordinary people would avoid them. Of course, for some capable people, ancient tombs had another advantage, and that was that there would often be treasures inside. Back then, Wei Chong and his team were in a frenzy of bloodlust. Why would they be afraid of inauspiciousness? When they saw the tomb, they immediately went down to investigate, probably hoping to find some gold or silver. However, they encountered great danger, and almost all of Wei Chong's companions died. Wei Chong would never forget that scene for the rest of his life. He was lucky enough to survive, but that was because he was chosen by that terrifying beast to be its blood contract owner. Because in order to leave an ancient tomb, something had to use a medium. Wei Chong didn't tell anyone about this. He had to listen to his pet beast. It wasn't a man controlling a beast, but a beast controlling a man. However, Wei Chong didn't care about this. What he cared about was his meteoric rise. If he could satisfy his selfish desires. So what if he was controlled by a beast? Now that his highness had spoken, Wei Chong nodded, stepped forward, and activated his mystic art. The next instant, his stomach suddenly swelled up. Then, it was as if something was moving up from his stomach, down his throat, and onto the ground. It was a terrifying scene. Wei Chong's neck and mouth were stretched to their maximum size. Those who didn't know better would think they would burst. However, Wei Chong's body seemed to be different from others. His neck and mouth were several times larger than normal, and yet he was fine. Looking at the thing he spat out, it was clearly a piece of flesh. It was scarlet red with a layer of mucus. In the next moment, the mass of flesh and blood began to grow at an insane rate. Bones began to grow at a speed visible to the naked eye, mixing with the flesh and blood. It squirmed and expanded continuously, and in a short period of time, it had grown to the size of a giant elephant. Seeing this scene, both the city guards and the surrounding commoners felt their scalps go numb, and they subconsciously retreated. On the other hand, Wei Yan's eyes were filled with a kind of smugness. It was a smugness that all of them had to submit to him. Although he was in great pain now, every time he summoned this pet beast, he would feel terrible for a while, but that was fine, because every time, he would find satisfaction in other ways. In Wei Chang's heart, this was an equivalent exchange. As an ordinary soldier, he was able to obtain the power and status he had today because of this exchange. Therefore, he was even more arrogant because he thought that he deserved all of this. All of you, just wait and see. When this dire beast appears, you will know what fear is and what it means to be the strongest Tier 5, Wei Chang thought to himself. The mass of flesh and blood was still changing, but its silhouette was gradually taking shape. It looked like it had a human torso, a lion's head, bull's horns, a tiger's tail, eagle's wings, arms like an ape's, and legs like a wolf's hooves. Every part of its body looked like a part of a ferocious beast. Most importantly, after taking shape, this thing still had no skin. It looked a little like a skinned frog. At this moment, the unknown 100 beast stood up with a violent look in its eyes. No one dared to make eye contact with it. Even the surrounding beasts were so scared that they curled up into a ball, not daring to make a single sound. His Highness was pleased. This was the deterrent effect he wanted. Truth be told, Wei Chang was usually very flamboyant and demanded high prices. But no matter what, His Highness was satisfied because he valued Wei Chang's strength. This 100-beast monster was definitely the strongest among the 5th-rank beasts. In their kingdom, no other beast could go up against it. It was the same in other places. Just the number of Tier 5 beasts that submitted to this dire beast numbered more than 10. It was for this reason that it earned the title of the strongest Tier 5 beast. From the prince's point of view, a 5th-order beast was already the pinnacle of existence in this world. He had never heard of a beast that surpassed 5th order. So from this point of view, Wei Chang's 100-beast monster was the strongest in the world. Lin Jin might be famous, but in terms of combat strength, he was definitely no match for this creature. His Highness had come here to discuss terms with Lin Jin to see if they could work together and help each other out. His Highness was just a dire beast. If he wanted to ascend to the throne, he needed external help. Clearly, Jade Dragon Kingdom and Lin Jin were his choices. Now that Lin Jin was so famous, it would be a waste not to borrow his strength. Hence, he came. However, he didn't expect to be ignored like this. Still, His Highness wasn't surprised. If he didn't show off his skills, how would he know what he was capable of? Now that the entire Jade Dragon Kingdom knew about him, they would know how to entertain him. At this, His Highness looked pleased with himself. The dire beast's aura was indeed terrifying. In fact, it didn't just affect their surroundings, but the entire royal capital as well. Lin Jin was undoubtedly the first to notice this aura. He was currently inside the palace. He Qian had personally come to fetch him early in the morning, and they had been chatting as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Suddenly, a domineering aura emanated, startling many pet beasts around them. What a strong aura! Lin Jin was stunned. That aura was even trying to suppress his 3 pet beasts. However, it was still lacking. It wasn't just the ghost blood beast's aura that couldn't be suppressed. Xiaohua didn't even need to think about it. A rank 7 pet beast was equivalent to a true immortal. That aura earlier was at most at the pseudo-immortal realm, an entire realm apart. However, this was Lin Jin's first time sensing such a powerful beast's aura in Middle-earth, especially in Jade Dragon Kingdom. This surprised him. I have to go take a look. Lin Jin was about to get up when someone reported to him that someone had caused trouble in the royal capital. Upon hearing this, Lin Jin had a rough idea of what was going on. They must be a group of people. However, Lin Jin didn't know what they were up to. Why would they want to cause trouble on Jade Dragon Kingdom's auspicious day? Lin Jin was calm, but He Qian couldn't. Upon hearing that someone was causing trouble, He Qian flew into a rage. Chapter 756. Of course, Qian was furious. Today was the most important day for him and the Jade Dragon Kingdom. There was no room for any mishaps. He had to be on high alert at a time like this. Yet, someone just had to mess things up. How could he not be angry? They were clearly trying to trip him up. Who is it? Qian asked with a dark expression. The eunuch who delivered the news shuddered in fear and quickly explained the situation. It was a prince of a premium country and his entourage. Qian was still frowning. Now, he didn't care who it was. Even if it was a prince of a high-ranking country, he would not allow it to happen at this time. However, what made him feel strange was that the special envoy sent by the high-ranking country had already arrived. Why did another prince appear? This was the time to show the benefits of teamwork. Soon, a minister who was familiar with the premium country stepped forward and told Qian what he knew. It turned out that this premium country's internal strife was getting more and more intense. As for that prince, he was also a challenger for the throne. He was most likely here to cooperate. Admittedly, this minister was right. He had basically revealed the other party's objective. Your Majesty, one of King Wang's subordinates, goes by the name of Wei Chong. He's a well-known figure in Middle-earth. Everyone says that Wei Chong's pet beast is the strongest at rank 5. After this minister said this, someone else chimed in as well. It was obvious that many people knew of Wei Chong's name. After all, the word strongest rank 5 carried too much weight. Everyone knew that to become a premium country, rank 5 pet beasts were indispensable. And now that the other party had the strongest rank 5 pet beast, their name would immediately resound throughout the world. Strongest rank 5? Is that for real? Qian was stunned. Your Majesty, it should be true. It was said that after Wei Chong announced this title, many experts went to challenge him. But in the end, Wei Chong won by a landslide. At least 30 rank 5 beasts were defeated by him. Hearing this, Qian was also shocked. He turned to Lin Jin. Their response now depended on their trump card. Truth be told, Qian couldn't tolerate Lin Jin stirring up trouble in the royal capital and even killing its citizens. Although Qian was snobbish and had resorted to unscrupulous means to gain the throne of Jade Dragon Kingdom, he was still a good emperor who loved his people like they were his own children. If this matter was left unresolved, how could he face the people of the royal capital and Jade Dragon Kingdom? In the end, Lin Jin gave him a definite answer. A life for an innocent murderer. This is our Jade Dragon law. A simple sentence was enough to express his attitude. Qian regained his confidence. Men, come with Appraiser Lin to apprehend the culprit, Qian ordered. Everyone, this is my first time hearing and seeing a rank 5 expert. Don't you guys want to take a look? Lin Jin suddenly asked. There were many envoys from major countries, dignitaries of royalty, and ministers of the imperial court. Every one of them was of high status. Upon hearing Lin Jin's suggestion, they were obviously tempted. Some of them even expressed their desire to take a look. Let's go together then. Lin Jin had the intention to show off his skills. He understood that his reputation was more of a legend than anything else. Many people had only heard of him but never seen him in person. Lin Jin planned to go to the Nine-Heaven world this time. He didn't know how long it would take, so he had to ensure Jade Dragon Kingdom's safety. How could he do that? Deterrence. Today, Lin Jin planned to make an example out of them. By showing off his strength, especially in front of everyone, his story would no longer be just a legend. By then, no one would dare to plot against Jade Dragon Kingdom. This was Lin Jin's plan. Simple and direct. With a flick of his sleeve, white clouds appeared beneath everyone's feet out of thin air. The next instant, they were carried out of the palace. Heavens above, it wasn't exaggeration to say that half of the people here were scared out of their wits. Some of the civil officials had never seen something like this before, so they were trembling in fear. But most of them were excited and agitated. Flying on a cloud was a legendary technique of immortals. They had only ever read about it in books, but today they were experiencing it for themselves. Everyone was astounded by Lin Jin's ability. Those who had their doubts were now tossed to the back of their minds. This was amazing. Riding on the cloud, Lin Jin arrived at his destination in a few breaths. Lin Jin had the cloud descend before looking at the beast monster that was over 10 feet tall. As for the others, Lin Jin didn't even spare them a glance. The only one here who could catch Lin Jin's attention was this odd monster. Hundreds of people descended on a cloud. No one had ever seen such a scene before. The entire royal capital was in an uproar. Not only were the citizens and guests dumbfounded, even King Yu and the others were dumbfounded. Can one really fly on a cloud? King Yu's lips were quivering. He had heard of this before, but he thought it was an exaggeration. Now that he was witnessing it with his own eyes, he knew that the rumors weren't exaggerated. Among the 100 people, there was one person standing at the very front. That person must be the legendary Lin Jin. For some reason, King Yu was feeling a little afraid and regretful. Clearly, they had been too careless this time, but it was hard to say now. Wei Chong wasn't careless either. The monster's aura was still there. Wei Chong shared the same thought. He was actually shocked too, especially when he saw Lin Jin land with his own eyes. To him, Lin Jin was like a towering mountain with an unshakable aura. Wei Chong felt that his only hope now was the monster. Lin Jin is amazing, but the monster isn't that bad either. They probably won't pursue the matter too much. They'll consider the bigger picture and weigh the pros and cons, Wei Chong mused, trying to console himself. But the next moment, Lin Jin said, "Today, I'm here on His Majesty's orders to capture the culprits. Whoever did it, step forward." Domineering. Even against the monster, Lin Jin had no intention of backing down. Wei Chong's younger brother was terrified, but he still believed that his brother and King Yu could protect him. Hence, he continued to console himself, fearless. No one spoke. Lin Jin smiled. "Since no one is willing to step forward, I'll capture them all and interrogate them slowly." "Hold it." King Yu's expression darkened. He was a premium country's king. If he were to be captured just like that, where would his dignity go? Wei Chong was enraged. He continued channeling his mystic technique. Even if he had to pay a price, he had to force the monster to reveal its strength. Either way, he couldn't let the monster capture him. But what happened next was beyond Wei Chong's expectations. No matter how he channeled his mystic technique, the monster didn't respond. It wasn't that his spell was useless. It was because the monster was ignoring him. The next instant, Wei Chong let out a blood-curdling scream as blood burst out of his body. His veins were damaged, and he fell to the ground, gravely injured. Chapter 757. This was the method to break a blood contract. However, he wasn't the one doing it. It was the beast monster. In other words, the beast monster had abandoned Wei Chong. No one expected this to happen, including Lin Jin. However, Lin Jin wouldn't interfere in this matter. He merely stood aside and watched quietly, waiting to see what the other party would do. Of course, if he had to comment on this, Lin Jin felt that this was a good thing for the guy who was vomiting blood. Lin Jin could already tell that the guy was being controlled by the beast monster. It wasn't a man controlling a beast, but a beast controlling a man. The guy must have been living a tough life. Now that the beast monster had let him go, freeing him, it was a good thing. It was as if a prisoner had been released and gained freedom. This was great news. While Lin Jin was happy for the other party, the same couldn't be said for the princes. Their jaws dropped, and fear crept into their hearts. Immediately, someone came over to help Wei Chong up. Who would have thought that Wei Yong would throw off the person supporting him? His expression was one of panic and fear as he said to the 100 beast monster, "Beast Lord, why did you break the blood contract? Did I do something wrong?" The beast monster ignored him. However, Wei Chong refused to budge. Like a spare tire who had been dumped by a goddess, he kept begging for mercy. This scene definitely refreshed everyone's understanding, but Wei Yong couldn't care less at this time. He knew very well that everything he had was given to him by the 100 beast monster. Without the beast monster, he was nothing. Hence, he knelt on the ground and begged the beast monster to take control of him again. This way, he could regain everything he had lost. Otherwise, Wei Chong knew that he would die a horrible death, a death without dignity. He had made too many enemies. If Wei Chong was like this, his younger brother was scared out of his wits. His legs were trembling. Why did his big brother end up like this? What was going on? Why did his big brother have to kneel before the pet beast and beg for mercy? His mind couldn't process what was going on. Meanwhile, the 100-beast monster ignored Wei Chong and leaped toward Lin Jin. Appraiser Lin, be careful! He Qian and the others cried out in fright. After all, Lin Jin was too important to them. They couldn't afford to let anything happen to him. If anything happened to Lin Jin, Jade Dragon Kingdom's promotion to a premium country would be over. He Qian knew this very well. However, his worries were in vain. Lin Jin wouldn't lose his composure in front of a creature that was at most at the pseudo-immortal level. He didn't even need to use his pet beast's strength. Lin Jin could easily slay this creature with just his breezy sword. Lin Jin wasn't boasting, but he truly had the ability to do so. Hence, even when the monster was only 5 feet away from him, Lin Jin remained unperturbed. Of course, what surprised Lin Jin was that the breezy monster sword at his waist only buzzed as a warning. It didn't leave its scabbard. What did this mean? This meant that the 100-beast monster was not hostile. On the contrary, there is kindness. Others might not be able to sense it, but the clear wind demon's sword could. As Lin Jin stared at the creature stared back at him. Admittedly, Lin Jin was quite interested in this creature. He had never seen it before and wondered what it was to have such a strange appearance. Let's appraise it and study it carefully. It's definitely a new breed. Lin Jin sized up the creature as if he was looking at a rare treasure. His gaze sent chills down the creature's spine. In the next instant, the creature bowed and knelt. Lin Jin didn't feel anything. Since the creature was weak, it was only normal for it to kneel. However, this scene was shocking to the others. Wei Chong, who was in a daze, felt as if his heart had been stabbed by a knife. His mind went blank. What the hell is going on? Wei Yong felt like he was in a nightmare. He knew better than anyone how terrifying the 100-beast monster was. It wasn't called the strongest at the 5th step for nothing. Wei Yong even knew that the 100-beast monster was most likely at the 6th step. In Wei Chong's eyes, nothing could be stronger than this creature. Hence, Wei Chong worshipped this creature, just like a god. But now, the strongest god in his eyes was kneeling before a mere mortal. Wei Chong's faith crumbled, and he went insane. Perhaps it was too much of shock, coupled with the blood he vomited earlier. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed to the ground. Dead. Part of it was due to anxiety, part of it was due to the intense shock and fear. Regardless, Wei Chong had died just like that. However, this was a good thing for him. Even if he didn't die, he would only die a worse death when he returned. Big brother. Wei Chong's younger brother was scared out of his wits at this scene. While he was arrogant, he wasn't stupid either. He knew a thing or two about the ways of the world. The only reason he dared to be so arrogant before was because he had his big brother and his highness's protection. Of course, the main reason was his big brother, Wei Chong. Without Wei Chong, his highness wouldn't have bothered with him. Wei Chong was a sky. Now that his sky had fallen, he knew what would happen to him. His highness would probably hand him over before he returned. Judging by the Jade Dragon Kingdom's stance, it was obvious that they were out to capture him. There was no need to think about what would happen to him if he ended up in their hands. Regardless of how he was calling for a dead man, Lin Jin was curious about the creature kneeling on the ground. He took a step forward and placed his hand on the creature's head. To others, Lin Jin seemed to be accepting the creature's submission. But in reality, Lin Jin was appraising the creature. In an instant, the Museum of Deadly Beasts changed drastically. Lin Jin's pupils dilated, his expression one of shock. He knew this creature wasn't as simple as it seemed, but he didn't expect it to be this special. To put it bluntly, it wasn't just a beast, but something that was gathered together by some kind of energy. There was a fragment inside the creature's body. It was at most the size of a fingernail, but there was more to it than met the eye. A fragment of the Heavenly Tao's foundation stone. Lin Jin muttered in a voice that only he could hear. He now knew why this creature would kneel at the sight of him. It was because Lin Jin had found out through various clues and signs that his greatest trump card, the Museum of Deadly Beasts, contained a fragment of the Heavenly Tao's foundation stone. Of course, it was much bigger than this fingernail-sized fragment, because they came from the same source, The creature sensed a similar aura the moment it laid eyes on Lin Jin. Hence, it immediately submitted to him. It was no wonder Lin Jin found this creature familiar. It was for the same reason. As Lin Jin pressed his hand on the beast monster's head, he had a feeling that he could immediately dig out the fingernail-sized Heaven's Path Foundation fragment from inside the beast monster's head. But if he did that, this creature would cease to exist. Chapter 758. After a moment of hesitation, Lin Jin decided against it. Since this small fragment of the cornerstone of the heavenly Tao had its own fortuitous encounter, it was able to condense into the form of a ferocious beast, and it could even cultivate on its own, mastering the blood pact technique and many other cultivation techniques. It would be a waste to destroy all of this. Why not keep it for now? In the future, Lin Jin could bring this creature along when he headed to the Nine Heaven realm. It might come in handy. With a thought, the 100-beast monster obediently stood at the side. Without the need for a blood contract, Lin Jin could control this creature, adding another pseudo-immortal to his ranks. Moreover, he had a special connection with this creature that was similar to a blood contract. It felt like a superior controlling its subordinate. Everyone could see how Lin Jin easily dealt with a problem without even lifting a finger. Especially since Lin Jin didn't even need to lift a finger to defeat the creature in a dominating manner. This proved one thing. The rumors about Lin Jin were true. Lin Jin was indeed a living immortal, the #1 expert. Jade Dragon City citizens, soldiers, and officials alike felt as if they had been injected with a shot of adrenaline. They were filled with glory and confidence. As for those who weren't from Jade Dragon Kingdom, they had mixed feelings. However, the ones who felt the worst and the most terrified were His Highness and his entourage. Wei Chang was dead, and he had died in such an inexplicable manner. This time, the prince's greatest reliance was gone, or rather, his only reliance was gone. He was feeling terrible now. He didn't know what to say or what to do. But as expected of His Highness, his mind worked fast. He immediately understood the situation before him. Establishing his might and cooperating with them was out of the question. Looking at the current situation, it was hard to say whether he could leave this place alive. His Highness ordered his subordinates to capture Wei Chang's younger brother and tie him up. This was his attitude. The situation had changed. But His Highness knew that Lin Jin had informed him beforehand that he was here to capture someone. Capture who? Someone who caused trouble and killed people in Jade Dragon City. The person who destroyed the inn and caused such a ruckus was Wei Chang's younger brother, so there was nothing wrong with his actions. His Highness even took the initiative to step forward and bow to Appraiser Lin in a subservient manner before saying, "Appraiser Lin, this is the person who caused trouble and killed someone. Although I tried to dissuade him, I couldn't stop him. Now that he has been captured, Appraiser Lin will deal with him." It was as if he was ready to kill or cut into pieces at any time. However, he wasn't the one who would be killed or tortured. When Wei Dan's younger brother heard this, he cursed angrily. The guard at the side was quick to grab a rag and stuff his mouth. This guard had been chatting happily with Wei Chang's younger brother, and they even addressed each other as brothers. But now he had turned on them. Wei Chang's younger brother was filled with grief and anger. Wei Chang's younger brother was filled with grief and indignation. He wanted to control his pet beast, but the 100 beasts had suppressed all beasts below rank 6, so his flaming snake couldn't move at all. Lin Jin waved his hand. Immediately, someone from Jade Dragon City dragged the tied-up man over. There was someone who had escaped from the inn. This also proved that the person who had attacked previously was this person. With this, there was no doubt that the murderer had been brought to justice. Take him away. I'll let the government office decide what to do with him. Lin Jin waved his hand before glancing at the flaming snake. This beast is too vicious. Leaving it alive will only bring trouble, Lin Jin said. Then, in a flash, he teleported in front of the flaming snake. He pressed his hand down. Boom! The flaming snake burst into flames and was reduced to ashes. A Tier 3 rare beast was killed so easily. It was even easier than crushing an ant. Although many of the people present could kill a rank 3 ferocious beast with ease, they could not do it like this. After all, after the death of this flame-frenzied snake, not a single bit of its body was left. Just this little bit of difference was not something that anyone could achieve. While this incident seemed to be over, it wasn't completely resolved yet. Lin Jin still wouldn't show this king any respect. The murderer is your subordinate. Isn't it a little too late to tie him up? Lin Jin questioned him directly. Forget a mere king of a premium country. Even if the emperor was here, Lin Jin would use the same tone. His Highness was completely terrified now. He finally realized that coming to Jade Dragon City to stir up trouble was a stupid idea. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world. Fortunately, he thought he was quite eloquent, so he decided to explain himself. But Lin Jin clearly didn't want to hear his explanation. You're incompetent if you can't control your subordinate. Or perhaps it was your idea to kill and cause trouble. Either way, you won't be able to escape the blame. Men, take him down and have their emperor come personally to redeem him. You're not allowed to release him until he arrives, Lin Jin said nonchalantly, but it scared the living daylights out of the king. He was currently fighting for power and the throne with his country's emperor. Why would the other party come to redeem him? Wouldn't that be asking for his life? No way. The terrified king immediately knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. Unfortunately, he was immediately escorted away by several strong soldiers. None of the guards and subordinates the king brought with him dared to make a sound. It wasn't that they weren't loyal, but the beast beside Lin Jin was simply too intimidating. Right now, it was as if there was a ferocious tiger on their necks. The slightest movement could bring disaster upon them. Under such circumstances, which one of them would dare to move? Lin Jin had captured a king of a premium country with just a few words. Moreover, it seemed like Lin Jin couldn't be bothered to be calculated with the man. After all, other than killing a pet beast, Lin Jin hadn't done anything to anyone else. He was only following the rules, capturing and interrogating people. Unfortunately, Wei Chan's body couldn't take it anymore, and he couldn't blame Lin Jin for that. Throughout the entire process, Lin Jin had displayed his dominance. Other than him, no one present, including He Qian, dared to make a sound. Lin Jin was aware of this too. But that was fine. He believed that He Qian wouldn't mind. Even if he did, Lin Jin couldn't do anything about it. After a few more days, Lin Jin would head to the Nine Heavens world to help Xiao Hua find the path to his next evolution. Unlike other places, the Nine Heavens world might take some time. Hence, it would be best to settle things at home as soon as possible. It would be best if it was done once and for all. Of course, Lin Jin knew that relying on his name to protect the Jade Dragon Kingdom wouldn't last long. This so-called reputation would eventually fade away, and when that time came, Jade Dragon Kingdom would have to rely on itself. However, now that Jade Dragon Kingdom was on its way to prosperity, Lin Jin didn't mind contributing to its success. After this little interlude, Jade Dragon Kingdom's promotion ceremony officially began. It went smoothly as no one objected to Jade Dragon Kingdom's promotion. On the contrary, all the representatives of the premium countries agreed unanimously. With this, He Qian only needed to notify the various provinces, and Jade Dragon Kingdom would be promoted to a premium country. At this promotion ceremony, there was another interlude. Many teachers from the Heavenly Jade Academy came, and they brought proof of promotion. On it were the signatures of every beast appraiser in Heavenly Jade Academy, including those from Little Library. The content was to recommend Lin Jin as a rank 5 beast appraiser. Chapter 759. A rank 5 beast appraiser was the highest level of beast appraisers. This was the highest realm a beast appraiser could reach after the rise of beast appraising. And now, Lin Jin had achieved it. However, Lin Jin didn't think it was all that impressive. After all, he was already a rank 5 beast appraiser. This title was just a bonus at best. Of course, Lin Jin didn't care, but the Jade Dragon Kingdom did. A rank 5 beast appraiser. Even among premium countries, how many rank 5 beast appraisers did they have? Not many. Now, not only did the Jade Dragon Kingdom have a rank 5 beast appraiser, but they also had a rank 5 beast appraiser. They were now the cream of the crop among premium countries. Qian had been beaming ever since he arrived. However, Lin Jin was more concerned about expanding the Jade Dragon Kingdom's Beast Appraisal Association. Fortunately, Qian was supportive and gave him whatever he wanted. Just the land alone was enough for the royal capital to be divided into a large area that was even bigger than his palace. When it was completed, it would be on par with Heavenly Jade Academy. Lin Jin wanted to establish an academy too. This would be his contribution to the Jade Dragon Kingdom's Beast Appraisal Association. Half a month after their country was upgraded to a premium country, more renowned beast appraisers came to seek shelter under the influence of this news. Of course, they were all here for Lin Jin. Because of this, Lin Jin lectured at headquarters for 7 days. The place was packed to the brim every day. After staying in the royal capital for more than a month, Lin Jin knew he couldn't afford to delay any longer. During this time, he took some time to return to Maple City. The city was still in the midst of reconstruction, and it would take at least 2 to 3 years for the damaged buildings to be rebuilt. After informing his friends and family, Lin Jin was ready to leave. Not many people knew about his trip to the Nine Heavens realm, and they were all Lin Jin's direct subordinates. Hence, the Nine Heavens realm was even more dangerous than the outer realm because the immortal devouring beast resided within a realm. Hence, Lin Jin brought very few people with him this time. Other than the beast monster that submitted to Lin Jin, there was also the butterfly Demoness. After all, she was responsible for leading the way. According to the butterfly witch, ever since she escaped, she had never returned, nor did she dare to. If it weren't for Lin Jin's request, she wouldn't have gone back either, because the immortal devouring beast was not the only threat in the Nine Heavens profound world. Of course, Lin Jin wasn't completely free of worries. Take the Beast God's cult leader and Patriarch Shui Pao, for example. Both of them had escaped without a trace, and Lin Jin had no idea where they were hiding to cultivate. There was no doubt that these two were a huge threat. If they were to launch another sneak attack on the Jade Dragon Kingdom, it would be troublesome. Fortunately, Lin Jin was prepared. Or rather, it was an ambush, a trap. Back at Jade Dragon City in Maple City, Lin Jin had Shu Xiaolu draw the cloud bridge that connected to the unending nature landscape. On the other side of the unending nature landscape was an extraterrestrial realm. If the Beast God cult leader and Patriarch Shui Pao launched a sneak attack, Monk Hui Yuan, Reverend Miao Yin, and the rest of the immortal Dao experts would come out together. Anyway, the Beast God cult leader and the rest would not dare to expose themselves directly. They would definitely use the black fog sky locking technique. This way, Monk Hui Yuan and Reverend Miao Yin could also come out to deal with the enemy. Based on Lin Jin's estimation, Beast God's cult leader and Patriarch Shui Pao were no match for Monk Hui Yuan and Spiritual Master Miao Yin. If they really ran into each other, they would definitely lose. Everything was ready. Early in the morning, Lin Jin walked out alone with a colorful butterfly fluttering beside him. Then, Lin Jin rode on a cloud and drifted away. 2 days later, Cloudy Sky Mountain in the South Sea. Lin Jin rode on a cloud all the way to the peak. This mountain was extremely tall. If an average person described it as a 100,000 feet tall mountain, then Cloudy Sky Mountain should be worthy of this description. Anyway, this was the highest mountain Lin Jin had ever seen. Looking down from the peak, all he could see was a sea of clouds. Kai-Dai transformed into her human form and said respectfully to Lin Jin, "Appraiser Lin, this place used to be called Sky Peak. You can reach the Nine Heavens profound world directly, but you'll need to use a cloud bridge to get there." Cloud Bridge, an upper-class immortal spell. This wasn't something just anyone could learn. Most importantly, they couldn't learn it. Only a handful of immortal officials knew about it in the past. However, Kai-Dai only knew about it because she overheard an immortal official mention it when she was at the Immortal Queen's Garden. She was extremely intelligent and had great comprehension, so she secretly memorized it and practiced it herself. That was how she managed to learn it. Without this method, she wouldn't have been able to descend. Similarly, without this method, Lin Jean could forget about reaching the nine heavens' profound world. Please wait, appraiser Lin. I'll cast Cloud Bridge now. Kai Dai bowed respectfully before starting the spell. This would take some time. Lin Jean invoked a spell, and a ball of fresh blood gathered before him. Then a ball of flesh emerged. This was a 100-beast monster. Lin Jean had been experimenting on her in his spare time, and he managed to learn quite a few things. For example, the 100-beast monster's ability to regenerate infinitely. As long as the Heaven's Foundation fragment remained, even if it was blown to smithereens, this 100-beast monster could still return to its original form. This was equivalent to having an immortal body. Coupled with the 100-beast monster's pseudo-immortal level strength, it would definitely become a formidable combat force. Moments later, Kai Dai was done casting her spell, and the Cloud Bridge appeared. This was Lin Jin's first time seeing a cloud bridge that led to the nine heavens' profound world. He was incredibly calm. The cloud bridge was thousands of feet long and stretched into the void. Shrouded in mist, it was like a paradise. Kai Dai's forehead was drenched in sweat. Casting the spell was clearly taxing on her. However, she still needed to lead the way, so she had to follow Lin Jean. Lin Jean could tell that Kai Dai was afraid of returning to the nine heavens' profound world. But to ensure that her young master Zhou could live another 10 years, she had to go. Lin Jean was quite impressed by this. After all, there weren't many women in this world who would risk their lives for something like this. Truth be told, if he didn't need Kai Dai to lead the way, Lin Jean wouldn't have brought her along. After all, her cultivation was far weaker than his. Once she entered the nine heavens' profound world, she would most likely die. By now, Lin Jean was already walking on the cloud bridge with Kai Dai beside him while the 100-beast monster walked in front. With an immortal body, it was most suited to be the vanguard. This cloud bridge was unusual. Standing on it, Lin Jean felt a sense of familiarity. It was very similar to the Sky Gate cloud bridge that led to the unending nature landscape that Xiao Lu had drawn. This gave Lin Jean a strange thought. The realm of the nine heavens was very similar to the unending nature landscape. So what kind of place was the realm of the nine heavens? Looking back, the mountain range gradually blurred. It was as if the moment he stepped onto this cloud bridge, he had entered another world. Back then, Lin Jean was able to enter a mystical state where he could see the nine heavens' profound world. He even obtained immortal beast blood from it. However, that was just a look. This time, he was entering it. The difference was huge. Let's go. Lin Jean retracted his gaze and began walking forward, following the cloud bridge into the nine heavens' profound world. Chapter 760. Nine Heavens' Profound World, where the Immortal Palace was located. The pavilions were like a forest, and the halls were long and magnificent. In the middle, there was a large hall surrounded by mountains. It was hidden in the shadows and looked quite eerie. The main style of the hall was black and dark. There was a sign hanging in the hall, which read, Judicial Division. The judicial department of the Immortal Palace was a place that any immortal would tremble in fear upon hearing of. Basically, if an immortal was brought here, they definitely wouldn't be able to obtain any benefits and would end up very badly. In addition to the interrogation hall, there was also the Immortal Prison, which was located right below the main hall. It was sealed with 81 layers of myriad formations. Immortals who were imprisoned in the Immortal Prison, no matter how high their cultivation base was, would not be able to escape, unless they had a key. Right now, inside the Immortal Prison, the formation that maintained the light had been dimmed for thousands of years due to the lack of spirit stones. As a result, the entire Immortal Prison was pitch black. Only a few formations had a weak light source. Behind the huge iron gate, an old man with a stiff face and wearing the uniform of a prison guard was looking outside the iron cage. Although he couldn't see anything from this angle and could only see a faint light, this light was already very precious in this place. The old man in the uniform looked extremely old. He was hunched, and the skin on his face and hand was like old tree bark. He could be described as half a foot in the grave. At this moment, the old prison guard looked outside, and his eyes flashed with memories. One could see that he had a lot of yearning for the outside world, but such a short distance was like an uncrossable chasm. Behind the old man, a figure walked over. It was a man with a long beard and a vertical eye on his forehead. He was 3 meters tall and looked extremely ferocious. "Lu Changchun, are they not back yet?" he asked. The old prison guard shook his head. "Lord Judge, no." The long-bearded, 3-eyed man laughed. "What judge? The immortal emperor has already been dead for 2,000 years, and the dynasty has long been destroyed. Right now, you and I are the same. How many times have I told you? Why can't you change your mind?" The old jailer smiled. "I'm used to it. There's no need to change it. I'm indebted to you for taking care of me all these years, thinking of ways to extend my lifespan. Otherwise, how could a mere hollow immortal like me live until now?" The judge sighed and murmured, "It's been 2,000 years. We've been struggling at death's door in this place for 2,000 years. I can't even remember how many immortals died here because their lifespans ran out." Hearing this, the old jailer's face darkened, but he quickly got over it. "It's so dark here, living in fear, living like a ghost." Perhaps death is a good thing, a release. Just as the old jailer finished speaking, a terrifying beast roar came from outside. His voice reached the horizon and resounded through the 9 heavens. In an instant, the old jailer and the judge trembled in fear. "It's him. This is bad. San Juan and Lu Gong must have been discovered." Both of them looked anxious. During the great trial of the immortal Tao, most immortals died. Some escaped into the outer regions, but a few were lucky enough to hide in this immortal prison. This immortal prison had 81 layers of restrictions that could block immortal chi, which was why immortal devouring beasts could not discover them. But at the same time, they could hide here, but they could not leave. If they were not careful, they would be discovered. Once the immortal devouring beasts found them, the consequences would be unimaginable. Immortals could not eat or drink for long periods of time. They could absorb heaven and earth's spiritual chi, but after a long period of time, they would feel hungry. More importantly, immortals had a limited lifespan. Hiding for 2,000 years, normal hollow immortals could not last that long. Under normal circumstances, hollow immortals could not live for more than 1,000 years, unless they had other methods to extend their lifespans. For example, some special spirit fruits or pills could extend their lifespans by hundreds or even thousands of years. In the past 2,000 years, many of the immortals hiding in the immortal prison had died because their lifespans were exhausted. One could imagine that the lofty immortals in the past would die in despair in this place. This kind of horror was not something ordinary people could bear. So, some immortals wanted to take the risk and go out, find some things to extend their lifespans, and then escape. But this was a risky move. If they rushed out like this, they would be discovered immediately, and the immortal devouring beasts might even notice the existence of the immortal prison. At that time, no one would survive. So, the immortals who hid here relied on their intelligence and came up with some ways to hide their auras. They had specially refined some magical treasures to suppress or even directly conceal their own immortal chi. Apart from that, they had also created some similar magical techniques. After continuously tempering them over the past hundreds and thousands of years, they were now approaching maturity. But even so, there was still the possibility of encountering all sorts of situations. Once, there was an immortal who went out and was discovered. Along with the roars of the immortal devouring beasts, they never returned. There was no need to investigate the results. Immortal emperors and many unfettered great immortals had died at the hands of the immortal devouring beasts. How could the others have survived? This was a game of cat and mouse. Once they were discovered, only death awaited them. Not long ago, an immortal in the immortal prison, Duke Lu, was nearing the end of his lifespan. If nothing unexpected happened, he would live for at most half a month. To Duke Lu, rather than using up his lifespan and dying in this place where there was no daylight, he would rather take a gamble. As for the three-ring immortal, he and Duke Liu were sworn friends. Although three-ring immortals still had a few decades of lifespan left, if Duke Liu died, it would be meaningless for him to live alone. So the two of them prepared for a long time before taking the risk to go out and find a way to extend their lifespans. Even if they went to Celestial Mother's orchard and secretly plucked a few fruits to eat, they would be able to extend their lifespans by 500 years. If they were lucky and could pluck a few more, they would be rich. There were many powerful immortals struggling at death's door in the immortal prison. One Celestial Mother fruit could be exchanged for high-grade immortal arts and high-grade immortal treasures. Apart from that, there were countless other benefits. Aside from the Celestial Mother fruit, there was also the Elder Lord pill. It was also a secret treasure that could extend one's lifespan by 1,000 years. If one ate a few more, they could live for another few thousand years. Although they could not defeat the immortal devouring beasts, they might be able to outlive them. It was a competition of who could live longer. To be honest, there were many immortals who went into hiding with this idea. But not all immortals had such a long lifespan. For example, the three-ring immortal and Duke Liu could only fight with their lives on the line. The roars of the beasts outside quickly died down. The old jailers and the judges' hearts sank to the bottom as well. Go back, there's no need to wait. The judge sighed. He was disheartened. In the past few years, among the immortals who had sneaked out, only one had managed to escape. No matter how well prepared the others were, they could not escape the fate of being discovered. Perhaps this path was impossible from the start. Their fate was to wait until their lifespans ran out and then die in despair. After taking a few steps, the judge realized that the old jailer was not following him. He paused and said, "It's a waste of time to wait any longer. No one will come." Before he finished speaking, the judge sensed something and turned to look at the corridor outside the old dragon. The old jailer also looked in that direction. Soon, footsteps could be heard. Chapter 761. The sound of footsteps meant that someone was coming. Who could it be? The judge's first thought was that it was a rank 3 immortal in Duke Liu. But on second thought, he didn't think it was possible. The immortal devouring beast's roar indicated that it had found its prey. It could only be a rank 3 immortal in Duke Liu. At least, the judge didn't think there were any other immortals living in the 9 heavens. It was because he didn't know and couldn't guess who it was that he was nervous. The old warden was nervous too. The two immortals stared at the end of the corridor, waiting to see who would appear there. Finally, a figure appeared. An immortal? Evidently, he was shocked that a celestial dared to move about outside. Moreover, he was sure that it was not a 3-ring celestial or Duke Liu, as they were too familiar with each other. That figure was clearly not one of them. The judge narrowed his eyes and shook his head. It's a mortal. A mortal. How could there be mortals in the 9 heavens? The old jailer couldn't figure out the reason for this. At this time, the mortals also saw them. This mortal was obviously Lin Jin. Ever since he stepped into the 9 heavens world, he had been following Kai Dai all the way, and he had seen sights he had never seen before. The 9 heavens world was the immortal world. How vast was this place? From Lin Jin's perspective, it was definitely bigger than both Middle Earth and the Outworld combined. And this was just one day in the 9 heavens. The 9 heavens combined was more than 10 times the size of Heartland. Now, Lin Jin realized that Heartland was just a tiny place. Back then, immortals occupied the best place and lived a carefree life. Meanwhile, mortals could only live a difficult life in Heartland, enduring the separation of life and death. Now that he thought about it, immortals were really greedy. They had enjoyed everything, yet they weren't satisfied. They wanted to rule for the heavens, but in the end, they were just digging their own graves. Of course, not all immortals were like that. Just like mortals, there were good and bad immortals. Sure enough, immortals couldn't be found in the 9 heavens, but the number of immortal beasts astounded Lin Jin. Kai Dai told him that this wasn't the case even during the peak of immortal cultivation. Immortal beasts were enslaved by immortals. Only after the immortals fell did immortal beasts begin to flourish without restraint. However, immortal beasts were immortal beasts. Not all of them had intelligence. Cultivation could unlock spiritual wisdom, but cultivation required the guidance of immortals. So the immortal beasts in the Nine Heavens Xian world were just slightly more powerful beasts. At least, that was what Lin Jin thought. This was also one of the dangers that Kai Dai mentioned. Although she was successful in her cultivation, she was still much weaker than some talented immortal beasts. If she encountered them, she would only become a hunting target. However, Lin Jin was the complete opposite. In his eyes, the Nine Heavens Xian world was simply a paradise. In just 2 days, he had collected hundreds of immortal beasts in a museum of deadly beasts. None of them were ordinary breeds. Any one of them was a rare beast. Also, Lin Jin wasn't afraid of these immortal beasts. At first, there were indeed some wild immortal beasts who wanted to attack Lin Jin. But Lin Jin didn't even need to do anything, as the 100 beasts were enough to deal with them. Occasionally, there would be some immortal beasts whose strength surpassed the 100 beasts monster. At this time, Xiaohu would reveal some of his aura, and he would be able to intimidate them. After all, even in Nine Heavens' profound world, there were not many immortal beasts that had reached the 7th rank. The journey was smooth, and Kai Dai felt more relaxed until they saw the immortal devouring beast with their own eyes. This wasn't Lin Jin's first time seeing an immortal devouring beast. Back at Daoyuo Temple, he witnessed a Buddha hidden in an underwater cave being killed by an immortal devouring beast with one swipe of its claws. Back then, the immortal devouring beast's strength was enough to destroy the world. It was also at that moment that Lin Jin realized what the strongest thing in this world was. It was also at that moment that Lin Jin set his goal of promoting his pet beast to rank 9. Initially, Lin Jin thought that he would be satisfied if his pet beast could reach rank 5. But now, even with Xiaohua at rank 7, Lin Jin still didn't feel safe. The immortal devouring beast's appearance was too sudden. If it weren't for the 2 frantically fleeing immortals, Lin Jin would have assumed that the immortal devouring beast was coming for him. Compared to the sudden appearance of the immortal devouring beast, Lin Jin was more curious about the 2 immortals. This was the Nine Heavens' profound world. How could there be immortals here? In the past, this would have been a faulty sentence, but now, it was the truth. What could be more interesting than 2 immortals appearing in a place where immortals couldn't possibly exist? And now, the immortal devouring beast was coming for these 2 immortals. Truth be told, Lin Jin's first reaction was to hide. Although he wanted to ask how the 2 immortals managed to survive until now to answer some of his questions, it was insignificant compared to facing the immortal devouring beast head-on. Lin Jin was strong, but he was still no match for the immortal devouring beast, so he had to cower. This was a tactic. As for the 2 immortals, Lin Jin could only wish them good luck. When the immortal devouring beast appeared, its body was enormous. Kai Dai was so frightened that she reverted to her original form and hid on Lin Jin's body. Xiaohua, who was inside Lin Jin, felt the immense pressure and began to stir. There were also those who remained calm and unfazed. The beast monster was one of them, and the ghost blood beast was another. Both of them were anomalies. They didn't have sentience or even thought processes, so it went without saying that they didn't know what fear was. If nothing went wrong, the immortal devouring beast would end up killing the 2 immortals. However, the development was unexpected. The 2 immortals began to flee in different directions, clearly using some kind of spell. However, the immortal devouring beast was faster. Although one of them was sent flying thousands of feet away, he was still killed by the immortal devouring beast at lightning speed. Its mountainous claws, imbued with flames and lightning, could easily destroy a city. No matter how powerful the immortal was, he wouldn't be able to withstand the attack. In the next instant, the immortal devouring beast went after the other immortal. There was a loud rumble in the distance, and lightning and fire surged. Then, the immortal devouring beast left, and everything returned to normal. The entire process was surprisingly quick, but in the blink of an eye, 2 immortals had fallen. Those were immortals they were talking about. They died no different from ants. Even though it wasn't Lin Jin's first time encountering an immortal devouring beast, he was still scared out of his wits. Even his fingers were trembling. It wasn't just his reaction, but Xiao Hua's as well. He was still scared. Regardless of how much his strength had improved, a gap was still a gap. This time, he was observing the immortal devouring beast up close. Besides, the 2 immortals killed by the immortal devouring beast were far stronger than the Buddha at Daoyuo Temple. Hence, the shock this time was even greater. Lin Jin took a deep breath and stood up. He looked at the huge crater in the distance and the lightning and fire around it. It's using lightning and fire this time. Lin Jin mumbled to himself. He had already appraised the immortal devouring beast. This creature was proficient in all 5 elements and was proficient in wind, thunder, fire, and lightning. It was an invincible existence with almost no weaknesses. For the first time, Lin Jin was shaken. Chapter 762. Even if Xiao Hua evolved to rank 9, would he be able to go up against it? After all, Xiao Hua's starting point was too low, and Lin Jin knew that the difference between people of the same rank could be as vast as heaven and earth. But even so, Lin Jin knew he had no other choice. Xiao Hua was currently the pet beast he was most confident in evolving. There were no other options. The alien silly bear was Lin Jin's backup, but it wasn't Lin Jin's pet beast. However, if he could get his hands on more celestial golden pills, he could share some with Silly Bear. With Lin Jin around, with some effort and tricks, there was a high chance that Silly Bear could evolve to rank 8. Evolving together with Xiao Hua was one of Lin Jin's trump cards. If a rank 9 Xiao Hua couldn't handle an immortal devouring beast, then he would have to deal with a rank 9 Silly Bear. 2 rank 9s against 1. 2 against 1. That should do it, right? Lin Jin was scared out of his wits by the immortal devouring beast, so his mind began to wander. But at that moment, Kai Dai noticed something. "Appraiser Lin, come over and take a look," Kai Dai said. Lin Jin went over to have a look and was startled by what he saw. He saw a person lying on the ground. He was naked and covered in blood. There was no trace of immortal aura on him. He was immortal. The latter had already fainted. Lin Jin felt like he had seen too many strange things today. He actually met a mortal in the 9-heaven world. Using his skill, the 4 seas unfettered gourd released a gourd of spirit water to envelop the man. Firstly, it washed away the filthy blood, and secondly, it nourished the man's wounds. There were many immortal palaces here that had been abandoned for thousands of years. Lin Jin randomly picked one and had his pet beast guard the entrance while he went to look after the mortal. After a brief inspection, Lin Jin came to a conclusion. If everything went according to plan, this man was dead meat. He had suffered severe internal injuries and lost too much blood, so he was unconscious. Injuries like this wouldn't be a big deal for a cultivator, but if he was immortal, even the gods wouldn't be able to save him. And yet, Lin Jin came up with a way to save him. This was a skill Lin Jin had recently come up with. Simply put, it was a forceful blood contract. Normally, blood contracts required the person who had formed a blood contract with a ferocious beast to cultivate. Using the blood as a guide, the person would be able to connect with the ferocious beast's bloodline through sorcery. In this way, the person would be able to obtain the corresponding ferocious beast's blessing and power. Meanwhile, Lin Jin's forced blood contract technique didn't require the other party to cultivate, nor did he need the other party's consent. He could force a human to form a blood contract with a pet beast. One should never underestimate this technique. Lin Jin was certain that he was the only person in Middle-earth capable of doing this. When Lin Jin first developed this spell, he was planning to use it against certain enemies, such as forcing them to form blood pacts with other pet beasts. This was the original intention behind this spell. But now this technique could actually be used to save people. This was something Lin Jin had never considered. After all, forming a blood pact with a ferocious beast was not a difficult task in the Central Plains. But now, if the other party was an unconscious person who didn't know anything, this was the only way. If an immortal beast could form a blood contract with this person could borrow the immortal beast's power to prolong his life. This way, Lin Jin could get to the bottom of this, killing two birds with one stone. Go and capture an immortal beast, Lin Jin ordered. This obviously wasn't Hikate's instruction. Upon hearing Lin Jin's order, the 100-beast monster that was guarding the door immediately darted out at lightning speed. Moments later, it returned with a mangled immortal beast in its mouth. Lin Jin was shocked. It's alive. The 100-beast monster dropped the corpse in its mouth and dashed out again. Just as quickly, it returned with a living immortal beast. It was a strange bird with 2 heads and 3 wings. This was also an immortal beast, a rank 6. It wasn't weak, but even at rank 6, the 100-beast monster could easily crush it. It couldn't be helped. The white beast monster was a freak that was basically invincible among its peers. It was a pity that even with the Museum of Deadly Beasts, Lin Jin couldn't find a way to help this 100-beast monster evolve. Otherwise, if he could promote it to rank 9, even immortal devouring beasts would have to kneel. The rank 6 bird was currently trembling in fear, clearly terrified. Lin Jin thought the bird was ugly, but after appraising it, its strength was acceptable. Since it wasn't his blood pact, Lin Jin ordered the 100-beast monster to bring the bird over. Then he extracted its blood and forced a blood contract with it. Xie San Huan woke up in a daze. I'm not dead. He opened his eyes and looked around to see that he was inside a house with a man standing next to him. Inside the house was a colorful butterfly, and on the other side was a 2-headed scavenger bird. There were many of these immortal beasts in the 9-heaven world. They liked to move in groups and were ferocious by nature, making them extremely difficult to capture. Especially after the fall of immortals. Without the suppression of immortals, these 2-headed scavenger birds grew stronger and stronger. Sometimes one could hear the cries of birds flying by outside the immortal prison, numbering in the tens of thousands. Similarly, due to the wild nature of these immortal beasts, even if they were captured, they couldn't be tamed, not even with spells. But now, Xie San Huan was looking at this 2-headed scavenger bird. It was clearly obedient, and there was a sense of familiarity in its 4 eyes. This was like seeing a ghost. Confused, Xie San Huan turned to the only person in the house. The other person was looking at him too. Immortal! Xie San Huan noticed something amiss, so he spoke first. However, he quickly came to his senses. That's right. Only mortals can move freely in this 9-heaven world. Only mortals won't be attacked by immortal devouring beasts. The fact that I'm still alive means that my immortal-inducing spell was a success. He sounded agitated as he spoke. Xie San Huan coughed a few times and instantly felt pain all over his body, especially his chest where his organs felt like they were being pricked by needles. When Lin Jin heard the word mortal, he knew there was more to this than meets the eye. But to his surprise, the man looked like he couldn't be bothered with him. There was a hint of arrogance in his expression, as if Lin Jin wasn't worthy of speaking to him. This made Lin Jin frown. Admittedly, fists were sometimes more effective than reasoning. After a round of beating, Xie San Huan begged for mercy. Stop hitting me. I'll tell you. I'm immortal Xie San Huan, a rank 6 scribe of the Celestial Dynasty, Xie San Huan said. Lin Jin shook his head. You're asking for a beating if you don't tell me the truth. And so, another round of punches and kicks erupted. With the power of their blood contract, Lin Jin knew when to stop so he couldn't kill the man. Xie San Huan had never been through this before, so he begged for mercy before finally telling the truth. During the great calamity of immortality, he hid in the immortal prison for 2,000 years. Recently, because his good friend, Immortal Lu, was nearing the end of his lifespan, he had no choice but to take the risk and come out in search of pills and spirit fruits to extend his life. Unfortunately, he alarmed the immortal devouring beast, and Immortal Lu was instantly killed. In that moment of crisis, Xie San Huan used a spell he had long developed but never used before. Immortal-inducing spell. To put it bluntly, it was to remove all of one's immortal cultivation and turn oneself into immortal. Chapter 763. Lin Jin was stunned to hear this. He mused, "This Xie San Huan is truly impressive. To think that he could come up with such a plan and be so ruthless. One must know that the path of cultivation was extremely difficult. Even during the golden age of the immortal Tao, not every cultivator could walk the path of immortality. Destroying hundreds or even thousands of years of cultivation was not something that just anyone could bear to do, nor was it something that just anyone could bear to do. However, after giving it some thought, Lin Jin realized that Xie San Huan had no other choice. Xie San Huan must have figured out a method to break immortality into the mortal world long ago. He just hadn't used it because he couldn't let go of his immortal cultivation. Back then, he was being hunted down by the immortal devouring beast and could die in an instant. Under such circumstances, there was no need to hesitate anymore. Survival was more important. But then again, breaking immortality into the mortal world felt like suicide. If Xie San Huan hadn't been lucky enough to meet Lin Jin, who forced him to form a blood contract with the two-headed scavenger, he would have been dead. Lin Jin told Xie San Huan the truth. Xie San Huan was dumbfounded. At the same time, he learned that he was forced to form a blood contract with the two-headed scavenger when he was on the brink of death. Xie San Huan only needed to hear a little about the blood contract spell to get away from it. It was no wonder the bird looked at him so affectionately. At first, Xie San Huan hadn't gotten used to his mortal identity, so he put on airs. When he saw that Lin Jin was immortal, he tried to act like an immortal. But after getting beaten up, he behaved himself. Not only did he behave, but he also recognized reality. The person before him was also immortal, but he was much stronger than Xie San Huan. After getting to know him better, Xie San Huan was certain that this man's strength was equivalent to that of an immortal, especially that strange beast he could control. It was definitely stronger than an average immortal. Otherwise, how could he possibly capture a two-headed scavenger alive? He had never heard of a spell that could force a blood contract. But now, he felt great because his life depended on the two-headed scavenger. If Xie San Huan could put aside his arrogance and inexplicable sense of superiority, Xie San Huan was actually a decent person. He started chatting with Lin Jin and felt that his attitude had become more sincere. Lin Jin also answered all his questions. Of course, Lin Jin also dug out everything Xie San Huan knew. With that, Lin Jin learned about the existence of the immortal prison and how immortals like Xie San Huan managed to survive until today. He also knew the greatest threat these immortals posed. His lifespan was running out. "Mr. Lin, I have a request." At this moment, Xie San Huan seemed to have thought of something. He stood up and bowed respectfully. "Speak." Lin Zhao no longer held any hope in the integrity of some immortals. Without the halo of an immortal, sometimes some immortals really couldn't compare to the educated and reasonable mortals. "I risked my life to go out this time for the sake of my good friend, Immortal Duke Liu. Unfortunately, we failed at the last moment. Duke Liu is dead, but there are still other immortals in the Immortal Penitentiary. Mr. Lin, could you go to the Immortal Penitentiary and tell them about the method of shattering immortals into mortals? At the very least, when their lifespans are about to end, they will be able to leave the Immortal Penitentiary and not die there." Then he bowed once more. Lin Jin understood now. He wanted Lin Jin's help to inform the immortals in the immortal prison. Truth be told, Lin Jin wanted to take a look too. During their conversation earlier, Xie San Huan had told Lin Jin how many immortals there were in the Immortal Penitentiary and how glorious it used to be. There were even many high immortal officials there. But now, they were nothing more than worms struggling at death's door. Unless they were about to die, they wouldn't dare to step out of the Immortal Penitentiary. With so many immortals around, they must know a lot, so Lin Jin wanted to take a look. Truth be told, Lin Jin's trip to the Nine Heavens world was more rewarding than he expected. Also, I know a place where pills are stored. There should be immortal pills that can extend one's lifespan. If Mr. Lin needs them, I can lead the way there, Xie San Huan added. Lin Jin smiled, thinking, this Xie San Huan is quite something. After becoming immortal, he must want others to be like him. Hence, he asked Lin Jin to tell them about the method of shattering immortals into mortals. How did C.S. San Juan determine this? He could tell from how tight-lipped he was back in the immortal penitentiary. Also, even if he claimed to be bringing Lin Jin there, he would definitely get some for himself once they reached the place. As for why C.S. San Juan didn't go himself, it was because he didn't dare to. The journey would surely be dangerous. However, Lin Jin couldn't be bothered to point this out. After all, this was a win-win situation, so there was no need to be too serious. C.S. San Juan must know this too, which was why he praised C.S. San Juan for being smart. If C.S. San Juan had suggested something that only he could benefit from, Lin Jin wouldn't have indulged him. First, they went to get the pills. As expected, the journey was fraught with dangers. There were ferocious, immortal beasts blocking their way. C.S. San Juan wouldn't have been able to make it through on his own, but things were different with Lin Jin around. They passed through easily and obtained the pills. And because there was no immortal aura, they didn't have to worry about immortal devouring beasts. C.S. San Juan was shocked by how smoothly things went. Upon arriving and breaking through the barrier, Lin Jin saw many immortal pills. He couldn't recognize most of them, so C.S. San Juan took the initiative to explain their effects to him. Needless to say, immortal pills that could extend one's lifespan were the best. C.S. San Juan's eyes lit up at the sight of these pills. This was clearly what he needed the most. As long as one could live long enough, mortals could live a carefree life. Lin Jin gave C.S. San Juan a few pills, and the latter quickly swallowed them. With this, he could live for at least another 100 years. Moreover, his movements were no longer restricted. As long as he slowly increased his strength without becoming an immortal, there would be plenty of good stuff waiting for him in the Nine Heavens realm. At this thought, C.S. San Juan felt that becoming immortal was quite beneficial. "You're not going to the immortal prison?" Lin Jin suddenly asked. C.S. San Juan answered honestly, "There are friends and enemies in immortal prison. Also, I feel guilty for not telling everyone about the method to become a shattered immortal. I don't have the face to face them, so I'll have to trouble Mr. Lin to make this trip." He wasn't lying. This was indeed his reason. Noticing C.S. San Juan's sincerity, Lin Jin didn't say anything else. Just becoming a shattered immortal wasn't a good thing right now. It would be better if the blood contract was included. Otherwise, becoming a shattered immortal was no different from committing suicide. It wasn't that easy for an immortal to become immortal again. Knowing that Lin Jin was looking for the celestial golden pill, C.S. San Juan came up with a plan. "Mr. Lin, I know about this superior grade immortal pill, but it's a pity that my cultivation level isn't high enough, so I've never seen or eaten it. It should be in the Shang Santian or Violet Cloud Immortal Palace. But the journey is fraught with danger." Lin Jin was used to C.S. San Juan's personality, so he didn't pin his hopes on him. And so, the two parted ways. It was obvious that C.S. San Juan was terrified of Lin Jin. That was why he didn't travel together, because he was afraid that Lin Jin would beat him up. He was traveling alone with a two-headed scavenger bird to protect him. As long as he was careful, he should be fine. Chapter 764. After C.S. San Juan left, Lin Jin headed for the immortal prison. The moment he entered, he saw a huge corridor before him. At the end of it was the entrance to the immortal prison, which was made up of layers of iron railings. Although it sounded eerie, this place had become the immortals' final shelter. Compared to the immortals hiding here, the ones who had escaped into the outside world were much luckier. Lin Jin looked at the old warden and the magistrate while the two of them looked back at him. Mortals? The warden and the magistrate were shocked. Lin Jin had a rough idea of who they were based on the information C.S. San Juan had given him. And so, Lin Jin explained C.S. San Juan's situation. "How do I get in here?" Lin Jin asked. Inside the immortal prison, Lin Jin had already passed through the restriction at the entrance. Colorful butterflies hung around his waist. Lin Jin had left the beast monsters outside the immortal prison just in case. However, there wasn't much to be wary of. Lin Jin was now extremely powerful. Even if these immortals harbored ill intentions, they were no match for him. Lin Jin wasn't afraid of a true immortal. Moreover, these immortals had no reason to be hostile towards him. Soon, 90% of the immortals in the immortal prison had arrived. Those who hadn't were said to be hiding in the deeper parts of the prison. No one knew if they were dead or alive. Most of the commonly seen immortals had been summoned here by the old warden and the magistrate. And among them was a true immortal. Lin Jin greeted the immortals and explained Xie San Juan's situation. Then he said, Xie San Juan didn't want to return, so he asked me to teach you the method of mortal ascension. You can decide for yourselves. At this, the immortals had varying expressions. Some looked tempted while others frowned in deep thought. No one knew what they were thinking. Of course, some tried to find out about Lin Jin's background while others speculated that he had used the method of mortal ascension. In the end, Lin Jin told them that he was a true mortal from Middle-earth. Impossible. One of the old immortals blew his beard in disbelief. How could a mortal like you come to the Nine Heavens realm? And how could you avoid so many immortal beasts? Indeed, this was a problem they couldn't figure out. Then, Lin Jin explained the art of blood contracts and pet beasts to this group of immortals who were completely clueless about the outside world. The immortals were also dumbfounded. Of course, there were also knowledgeable immortals who nodded after giving it some thought. This should be a branch of the beast taming path. I didn't think there would be a chance for it to develop and grow. That's good too. With the decline of the immortal path, the path of immortal ascension has been severed. Taking the path of blood packs is also a good idea. From these words, it was clear that he was selfless and considerate of the common people. However, with a gem like Xie San Juan in front of him, Lin Jin couldn't place too much hope on the other immortals. Immortals were humans too, and sometimes they were even more selfish than mortals. Lin Jin completed Xie San Juan's request. After some thought, he decided to tell Xie San Juan about the drawbacks of becoming a shattered immortal. However, he had a solution, which was to form a blood pact with his pet beast and use its strength to offset the damage he would suffer after becoming immortal. The immortals understood and had different thoughts. Lin Jin began to ask about the things he was concerned about. The immortals all chimed in, telling Lin Jin everything they knew. Clearly, the immortals couldn't possibly spout nonsense in a situation like this. If they did, they would be exposed immediately. Hence, Lin Jin was able to find out the truth. Now that he had done what he needed to do, Lin Jin planned to leave. Just then, an old immortal stepped forward and said respectfully, Mr. Lin, please wait. Is there anything else? Lin Jin glanced at the old immortal. It was obvious that this old immortal used to have a high status. However, he had aged considerably now, probably nearing the end of his lifespan. The old immortal smiled. I wonder if Mr. Lin can do me a favor and help me form a blood pact with a pet beast. Having said that, the old immortal suddenly emitted an immortal glow before shattering with a loud bang, becoming a shattered immortal. The next instant, the old immortal spat out a mouthful of blood and collapsed to the ground. His aura was weak, and it seemed like he wouldn't last much longer. Old immortal Nanhua. Old immortal, what are you? The other immortals were shocked. Although some of them already knew what old immortal Nanhua was going to do, they were still shocked by his decisiveness. After all, everyone knew that immortals could only hide in this dark immortal prison and waste away their lifespans until they ran out. But so what if they had a long lifespan? It was a fate worse than death. Since that was the case, they might as well give up on their immortal status and become immortal. At least they could be free and go wherever they wanted. Old immortal Nanhua clearly understood this, so he made a decisive decision. Also, he was so decisive because of the side effects of becoming a shattered immortal. Only by forming a blood pact with a pet beast would they be able to survive. But who knew how to form a blood pact? If Mr. Lin left, even if they decided to become mortals in the future, who would form a blood pact with their pet beasts? Without pet beasts, they would truly be mortals. Even if they didn't die from the side effects of becoming a shattered immortal, it would be hard for them to survive outside. On the contrary, while Mr. Lin was here, he could help them form a blood pact with a pet beast. This way, they would have some security after they became mortals. At least, it was better than being alone. This was old immortal Nan Hua's consideration. Lin Ji nodded. Then, with a mental command, the 100-beast monster dashed out. The 100-beast monster was now very familiar with capturing immortal beasts, so it was incredibly fast. In just a few breaths' time, the 100-beast monster returned. This time, it was clearly smarter as it had captured a live immortal beast. Upon seeing the beast monster, the immortals in the immortal prison shuddered. They wondered what kind of beast it was and why it was so strange. The beast monster brought back was a new species, an immortal crane. Rank 6 immortal beasts were common in the Nine Heavens world. This immortal crane stared at the beast monster in fear. Even if Lin Jin let it go, it wouldn't dare to move. Lin Jin walked over and grabbed the crane by its neck, forcefully dragging it over to old immortal Nan Hua. This scene left many immortals dumbfounded. An immortal crane has the strength of at least 10 bulls, but this mortal dragged it by its neck with one hand. Is he still immortal? One of the immortals wailed inwardly. He felt like the outside world had changed after 2,000 years of isolation. It had changed so much that he couldn't even recognize it. Lin Jin dragged the immortal crane over. Regardless of whether it was willing or not, he extracted its blood and forced the blood pact. The entire process was smooth. Once the blood pact was formed, old immortal Nan Hua felt as if he had received a cardiac stimulant. His eyes widened as he sat up from the ground. His weakened state and near-death state were gone. Right now, old immortal Nan Hua was just immortal, but he could control an immortal crane. As if he had been liberated, old immortal Nan Hua wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and got up to bow at Lin Jin. Chapter 765. For the first time in 2,000 years, old immortal Nan Hua felt like he was dreaming as he stepped out of the immortal prison. He was certain that the immortal devouring beast would no longer hunt him down. The pressure and nightmare that had been haunting him for 2,000 years had vanished without a trace after he broke into the mortal world. Hence, after thanking Lin Jin, the first thing he wanted to do was to go out and take a look, even if it was just a simple stroll or some sunbathing. After forming a blood pact, the immortal crane followed him closely. Although old immortal Nan Hua was much stronger than this little immortal crane when he was still an immortal, he was now immortal. It was already rare for a mortal to be able to tame an immortal beast. Hence, old immortal Nan Hua was content. Outside, old immortal Nan Hua was so touched that his eyes were brimming with tears. Inside the immortal prison, Lin Jin was surrounded by more than 10 immortals. Old immortal Nan Hua's safe exit from the immortal prison had clearly affected them greatly. To continue living in this sunless immortal prison, or to give up on their immortal status and walk out as mortals to enjoy life, they chose the latter. After all, they had had enough of these 2,000 years. Now that Lin Jin was here, he could help them form blood pacts with pet beasts. This was a chance that they might not get to see again if they missed it. After all, even if they decided to break into the mortal world, they might not be able to form a blood pact with pet beasts. And even if they learned how to form a blood pact, who could capture an immortal beast for them to form a blood pact with? Hence, this was their only chance to leave this place in the past 2,000 years, even if they had to pay a hefty price for it. Lin Jin didn't reject them. After all, having one more friend in the Nine Heavens world was one more way out. Moreover, many of these immortals were former immortal officials with high statuses. In Lin Jin's words, they were all civil servants of the immortal world, so they must know a lot that could be useful. And so, Lin Jin began capturing immortal beasts for these newly ascended immortals. Some immortals even took out their personal treasures and gifted them to Lin Jin, hoping that he could capture some decent immortal beasts for them. After all, according to Lin Jin, they could only form a blood pact with one immortal beast. Since he could only choose one, the stronger and more powerful it was, of course, the better. However, Lin Jin was the only one who could make the decision. Hence, after the first immortal offered a reward, the rest became a routine. Although the immortals had used up all their life-extending treasures in order to survive for the past 2,000 years, there were still plenty of other treasures left behind. For example, a suit of armor that was as thin as a veil and as light as a feather could be worn. It could block the attacks of immortals, and could even block 3 attacks from true immortals. Good baby. Lin Jin accepted it with a smile. This thing could save his life at a critical moment. It would be a waste not to take it. There was also an iron tower that could be activated with a magical technique. It was usually very small and could be played around within one's hand. It consumed a lot of magic power to activate it, but it was still accepted. If Lin Jin didn't need it, he could give it to someone else. Needless to say, Lin Jin did manage to obtain several valuable items on this trip, the best of which was a fire amethyst, materials for refining weapons. Although it couldn't be eaten or drunk, this item was condensed from chilling flames. It would be of great help to Xiao Hua's advancement to rank 8, so it would be a waste not to take it. Other than these items that were obviously useful, there are also some that weren't. For example, there was a pitiful old prison guard who didn't have any good items, so Lin Jin helped him out. He couldn't appear too utilitarian. After all, Lin Jin did manage to find out a lot of useful information from these immortals. Most importantly, he learned the location of the alchemy chamber of the immortal almighty Old Lord from a warehouse supervisor. He even knew how to enter it. It was said that Old Lord was the #1 alchemist in the world of immortals. His lifespan far exceeded that of an immortal emperor, and his experience was unparalleled. He had a real heaven and earth furnace that could be used to refine everything. Lin Jin had read about the heaven and earth furnace in some immortal books a long time ago. The inspiration for his self-created heaven and earth furnace came from this furnace as well. Lin Jin admired this old lord a lot. More importantly, with Lin Jin's knowledge, if Xiao Hua wanted to advance to rank 8 or even rank 9, he would need the heaven and earth furnace. This was clearly stated in the Museum of Deadly Beasts promotion method. It was written that the 5 elements were of the fire attribute. When refined with the cosmic flame, one would truly be reborn and achieve extraordinary achievements. Items of the fire attribute weren't complicated. One word could be summarized in one word: refine. Lin Jin did some calculations. If he could get his hands on the celestial golden pill and Old Lord's heaven and earth furnace, Xiao Hua's advancement to rank 8 was almost certain. It could even pave the way for him to reach rank 9 in the future. Hence, Old Lord's heaven and earth furnace was a must. The butterfly demonist didn't know about it, so he could only rely on the immortals here. That was why Lin Jin came to this immortal prison. Xie San Huan wasn't the only reason. This was the main reason. With Lin Jin around, the entire process of capturing immortal beasts and forming blood contracts with pet beasts wasn't a problem. Of course, the pet beasts here were different. There were all kinds of strange creatures. Some were cranes, some were strange birds, and there were even strange fish and giant turtles that could swim in the sea of clouds. There was also a giant centipede with 9 heads. These immortal beasts were all rank 6. Of course, it wasn't impossible to capture a rank 7 immortal beast. An immortal offered Lin Jin a huge sum of money just to capture a rank 7 immortal beast for him to use as a pet beast. This immortal was the warehouse supervisor who revealed the location of Old Lord's pellet room. Not only did he reveal this information, but he also secretly gave Lin Jin an immortal talisman. This is the immortal talisman used to activate Old Lord's heaven and earth furnace. You should know that not just anyone can activate Old Lord's furnace. One must at least be a carefree immortal. If not, one must use this immortal talisman. The warehouse supervisor could tell that Lin Jin was very interested in Old Lord's heaven and earth furnace, so after a moment of hesitation, he reluctantly took out the furnace immortal talisman. This item was clearly very precious. If it weren't for the special circumstances, the warehouse supervisor would probably be reluctant to take it out. His request was simple. He wanted to form a blood contract with a rank 7 immortal beast. This wasn't easy for Lin Jin either. One was difficult to capture, and the other was difficult to form a blood contract with. But for the sake of the reward, Lin Jin decided to give it a try. Having only 100 beasts wouldn't do. After some thought, Lin Jin released Xiao Hua. When they saw a wolf made of fire fly out of Lin Jin's body and rush out of the immortal prison, the immortals were dumbfounded as if they had never seen the world before. Their cultivation was still intact, so they could tell that this fire wolf was extremely powerful. It was almost at the level of a true immortal. The immortal's fingers trembled. A mortal could actually control a true immortal level immortal beast? How is this any different from an immortal? Chapter 766. The old warden and the judge had been thinking about the same thing. It was also something that puzzled them. How did Mr. Lin manage to enter the Nine Heavens world alone? Now they knew. Since he could even control a true immortal level immortal beast, it wouldn't be difficult for him to find a way to enter the Nine Heavens world. Not only did he not have to fear immortal devouring beasts, he also had a rank 7 immortal beast by his side, so he didn't have to fear the immortal beast hordes in the immortal realm. That was why he was able to stroll around so casually. The old warden had already decided to break into the mortal realm, so he didn't want to miss out on this opportunity. Previously, the judge was still hesitating, but at this moment, he finally made up his mind and walked forward. Lin Jin looked at the judge and the vertical eye on his forehead. He could tell that the man was a true immortal expert. There were a few true immortals in the immortal prison, but this one had excellent concealment skills. On the surface, he looked just like a pseudo-immortal. "Mr. Lin, you're from Middle-earth. May I know why you've come to the Nine Heavens world?" the judge asked. Lin Jin frowned. "I don't think I have to tell you that, do I?" Indeed, Lin Jin had no intention of telling anyone about his purpose. After all, the fewer people who knew about this, the better. The judge hurriedly waved his hands. "Mr. Lin has misunderstood. I was once a 6th-grade judge of the dynasty. Now that the immortal Tao has been in decline for 2,000 years, it's hard for it to rise again. If it wasn't for Mr. Lin, I'm afraid we wouldn't be able to break free even if we died. In this case, Mr. Lin is naturally our benefactor. Now that the Nine Heavens mystic realm has no ruler, Mr. Lin just so happened to be here, and you have mastered the art of blood pact. In the future, you will definitely achieve great things. I hope you'll grant me my wish." Having said that, the judge bowed respectfully. The man was now a true immortal expert. It was Lin Jin's first time seeing such a person bow to him. However, the judge's words did make Lin Jin fall into deep thought. This was quite attractive. Between the lines, he was just short of asking Lin Jin to establish a new system similar to that of a celestial dynasty so that he could rule over the 9 realms and stand above everyone else. Anyone would be tempted by this, and Lin Jin was no exception. However, he soon calmed down. This wasn't his goal. In the beginning, Lin Jin also wanted to become an immortal, but after experiencing so many things, he no longer cared about it. Being immortal was fine too, and compared to that, Lin Jin preferred to pursue a stable life. What was stability? No one could threaten him. That was the premise. That was why Lin Jin came to the Nine Heavens Xian world. He wanted to find a way to promote Little Fire to rank 8, or even rank 9. His purpose was not to kill the rank 9 immortal devouring beast, but to seek a balance. If the immortal devouring beast changed its mind and attacked him, at least he would have a way to deal with it. Moreover, Lin Jin was someone who lacked a sense of security, especially for a transmigrator like him. With a monster that could destroy the world right above his head, if Lin Jin didn't have the ability to deal with the incoming danger, he wouldn't be able to sleep well. More importantly, it would be fine if he didn't have the ability to do so. If others could just muddle through and pretend they didn't see anything, Lin Jin could do the same. But the problem was, Lin Jin clearly had the ability to evolve his pet beast. That was why he chose this path. Also, whenever Lin Jin had nothing better to do, he would use his fingers to count the number of enemies he had, and it turned out to be quite a lot. If Lin Jin didn't have a strong enough deterrence, his enemies would probably come knocking on his door the next day. Moreover, some of his enemies would definitely return. Lin Jin knew this. Hence, Lin Jin wasn't interested in building a new dynasty. But if he could gather a small team to help him find what he needed to help Little Fire evolve, that would be possible. After some thought, Lin Jin didn't reject the man. It was a good thing that someone was willing to join him. Moreover, Lin Jin really needed help right now. Just then, Little Fire and the 100 Beasts returned. This time, they had captured a rank 7 immortal beast. It was a large peacock that exuded a frosty aura. There was pride in the peacock's eyes, but more than that, it was indignant. It was helpless after being captured by Little Fire and the 100 Beasts. Xiaohua's attributes were clearly superior to the peacock's. It really is at the level of a true immortal. The warehouse supervisor from before was extremely excited. After all, his physical cultivation was only at the peak of a pseudo-immortal, not even at the level of a true immortal. And this ice peacock was so powerful that he wouldn't dare to provoke it if he was alone. But now, he could control it through a blood contract, since he was so dependent on it. So what if he had to give up his immortal cultivation? He believed that it was easy to tell whether he had gained more or lost more. Using this as an excuse, he managed to break his immortality and form a blood contract with this ice peacock at the level of a true immortal. Little did he know, it was Lin Jin who gave him the blood contract. If it were him, he wouldn't have been able to form a blood contract with a true immortal pet beast. Time trickled by. Almost half of the immortals in the immortal prison chose to break their immortality and enter the mortal realm. Lin Jin also captured immortal beasts for them to form blood contracts with. They chose to give up their cultivation and become mortals. Even if some of them were nearing the end of their lifespan, they might only have less than 10 years left after becoming mortals. To immortals, 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. But to mortals, there were many things that could be done in 10 years. Moreover, once they got out, they would have a chance to find ways to extend their lifespans. Either way, it was better than waiting here and struggling at death's door. At least they had found a way out. Some chose to leave, and some chose to stay. Clearly, there were many immortals in the immortal prison who couldn't bear to part with the cultivation they had cultivated for hundreds and thousands of years, so they chose to stay. With their high cultivation and long lifespans, they could afford it. Lin Jin wouldn't force them either. They were all adults who were thousands of years old, so he didn't have to worry about what path they should take. However, it was certain that he wouldn't be able to find another opportunity after this one. Once he left, it would be too late for them to regret their decision. And so, Lin Jin left the immortal prison. Following him were about a dozen immortals who had returned to the mortal realm. At first, these people were terrified, afraid that they would provoke the immortal devouring beast. But as time passed, they realized that the immortal devouring beast wouldn't attack mortals. This made them feel much more at ease. Mr. Lin, if you're looking for the celestial golden pill, you don't have to go to the garden. You could just go to Old Lord's pelletization room. After all, many celestial golden pills were refined by Old Lord himself. The warehouse supervisor suggested. Lin Jin's eyes lit up. This was a great suggestion. After all, even the butterfly demoness couldn't be completely sure that there was a celestial golden pill in the garden. But if it was Old Lord's pelletization room, Lin Jin's chances would be much higher. More importantly, the pelletization room had an heaven and earth furnace. If he was lucky, Xiaohua could advance to rank 8 on this trip. Chapter 767. Unlike when they first arrived, Lin Jin now had more than 10 immortals by his side. It was a sight to behold. The butterfly demoness stayed on Lin Jin's shoulder in her original form, not daring to speak much. Most of the time, it was just the talkative immortals talking nonstop. Perhaps it had been 2,000 years since they had spoken so freely, or perhaps they had never been able to enjoy the scenery while talking. Mr. Lin, to think that the mortal world has experienced so many changes. If there's a chance, I'd like to visit the mortal world, one of the immortals said. He wasn't the only one. The other immortals who had ascended to the mortal world shared the same thought. After all, strictly speaking, they were now mortals. It was normal for mortals to enter the mortal world. It was said that the colorful world was a distraction. In the past, to stabilize their cultivation, they were also restricted by the rules of the Nine Heavens world, so they didn't dare to descend to the mortal world. But now no one could stop them. They could go wherever they wanted. Some even thought that traveling the mortal world wasn't a bad way to live. Also, they weren't just ordinary mortals. Although their cultivation was gone, they still had thousands of years of knowledge. In addition, they had immortal-grade pet beasts. Not only did some of the immortals not weaken, they even became stronger. Since this was all thanks to Lin Jin, they were more than willing to help out. The Nine Heavens world was huge. If they had to fly there, who knew how long it would take them to reach the Old Lord's pellet room? There's a teleportation formation up ahead. The foundation is a 10,000-year spirit stone. It can still be used even after 2,000 years. One of the immortals said confidently. When they arrived, it was as they expected. Although the house looked a little run down due to the lack of maintenance, the teleportation formation was still intact. Spirit energy still swirled around it, slowly forming a beam of light. Had it been Lin Jin, he might not have known what it was used for even after seeing it. Now was the perfect time to show off the benefits of having a group of immortal followers. Without needing Lin Jin to worry, they started using the compass to determine their location. According to them, there were a total of 981 similar portals in the Nine Heavens realm, scattered throughout the realm. Even if they knew it was a portal, if they weren't familiar with the location, they might be teleported to an unknown location. If something happened to the teleportation formation there, it would be difficult to return. However, if it was used by someone familiar with the teleportation formation, it would be very convenient. The old Supreme Lord's pill formula is in a secret place in Shang Santian. Ordinary immortals don't know where it is, but I happen to know. I'll bring Mr. Lin there now. It'll only take a moment to use this teleportation formation, but if you want to fly there, it'll take 3 to 5 months, the immortal in charge of the warehouse said. There was a hint of pride in his words. Lin Jin nodded and thanked him for his hard work. The man was satisfied. Lin Jin didn't have to worry about anything else. He only needed these immortals to take care of things. Although they no longer had immortal cultivation, with the support of their pet beasts' blood contracts, they were quick and efficient. Soon, everything was ready. Activating the immortal formation, there was a sudden burst of light. Lin Jin felt the spirit energy around him condense, and the next instant, he saw a colorful stream before him. By the time the colors disappeared, he and the immortals were already somewhere else. This place was vast and boundless, and no one knew how big it was. There were stars and moons above their heads, and galaxies could be seen in the distance. However, this was not the most shocking thing. The most shocking thing was the gigantic pellet furnace before them. Lin Jin already had some understanding of this pellet furnace of heaven and earth. He had also heard some things about it, so he already knew what it was. But when he saw it for real, Lin Jin was still dumbfounded. You guys call this a pellet furnace? Lin Jin couldn't help but ask, because what Lin Jin saw wasn't a pellet furnace, it was a tiny planet. A tiny planet in the Nine Heavens realm floated in the air. It was so huge that it was bigger than anything Lin Jin had seen so far. However, this wasn't just a tiny planet. It had been modified, or rather, refined. Its interior had been hollowed out, and it was said that 99,000 intense sun-fire formations had been installed inside to last for 10,000 years. However, the interior of this pellet furnace of heaven and earth was pitch black. The warehouse supervisor who introduced Lin Jin to this pellet furnace wore an awkward expression. He probably didn't expect the fire inside the old Supreme Lord's pellet furnace to be extinguished, mainly because he didn't know how to activate old Supreme Lord's pellet furnace. But soon, the warehouse supervisor became excited again because he had helped Lin Jin find a place to store pills. There weren't any restrictions here, mainly because old Supreme Lord was so famous back in the day that even immortal emperors and empresses had to give him face, let alone regular mortals. So, who would dare to come here and steal? They would be courting death. It was also for this reason that the places where pills were stored were all wide open. For tens of thousands of years, no one had dared to come here and steal. This made things easier for Lin Jin. This also made things easier for the other fragmented immortals. They came here to help Lin Jin and also themselves. The pellet room of Old Supreme Lord was filled with pills. There were more than 100 types of pills that could extend one's lifespan. Since they had become mortals, their lifespans were only a few decades to 100 years. That was too short. If they wanted to enjoy life, they had to prepare some longevity pills. In fact, longevity pills weren't precious to them. Instead, pills that could aid in cultivation were hard to come by. For example, the celestial golden pill that could help a true immortal ascend to a carefree immortal. Each pill could cause a bloodbath in the world of immortals. Just like how heroes would fight for a beautiful woman, they would risk their lives and go all out. They would use any means at all. However, after fragmented immortals entered the mortal world, these pills that could aid in cultivation were no longer as appealing. They could even be said to be worthless. Just like how eunuchs would look at beautiful women, they had long lost the desire to do so. Now, they only wished for one thing: health and longevity. Entering the pellet room, Lin Jin realized that there was another world inside as well. Then he saw an ocean, a pellet sea. This was also the characteristic of the Grand Supreme Elder's pill chamber. It was said that the Grand Supreme Elder did not care about trifles. He would refine pills every day, sometimes one furnace, sometimes more than 10. Furthermore, he would refine pills as he pleased and did not follow common sense at all. Other than some of the pills that the big shots of the immortal world would specially collect and place them in a place that he would not forget, he would casually throw the rest of the pills into this pill chamber. Over time, this place became a pellet sea, a pellet sea. No one knew how many pills there were and how many types of pills there were. Even if Old Supreme Lord was reincarnated, he wouldn't be able to tell. Sometimes, when immortals who were on good terms with Old Supreme Lord needed pills, they would bring some fine wine and gifts. When Old Supreme Lord was happy, he would allow them to visit the pellet sea. The pellet sea contained almost all types of pills, so no matter who went, they wouldn't return disappointed. In the past, an immortal status in the world of immortals was judged by whether they had been to Old Supreme Lord's pellet sea. Chapter 768. The Sea of Pills was too shocking. Looking at it, one couldn't even see the end of it. Who knew how many pills Old Lord had refined and stored here? It seemed endless. Lin Jin had no idea what an Empyrean golden pill looked like. If he was alone, it would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. Fortunately, he wasn't alone. Including the colorful butterfly Demonis, many immortals who had seen the Empyrean golden pill before had joined the search party. Controlling their immortal beasts, they began flying around in search. Lin Jin, on the other hand, was much more relaxed. He picked up a pill at random. The pill was round, glowing with a white luster and emitting a rich medicinal fragrance. Although Lin Jin knew how to refine pills, he didn't recognize any of the immortal pills here. Moreover, they weren't pet beasts, so he couldn't rely on a museum of deadly beasts to identify them. Before coming here, Lin Jin had an idea. Since this was Old Lord's pelletization room, he had to take some immortal pills back. After all, any one of them was a priceless treasure. But here he was, looking at the sea of pills, and Lin Jin had no idea what to do. There were too many pills here, and he could take as many as he wanted. This made it difficult for Lin Jin. After all, even if he took a bunch back, he couldn't just eat them without knowing their effects. Also, even if they were immortal pills, they should have a shelf life. Lin Jin figured he should at least store them in a porcelain bottle with the name of the pill on it. It would be best if there was also a pill booklet with detailed descriptions of each pill's effects. This was what Lin Jin had envisioned. Unlike now, all the pills were piled up together like an ocean without any labels or identification system. Lin Jin had no idea where to start. Unless he knew the appearance and characteristics of a specific pill and spent time searching for it, all he could do was grab a handful of pills and run before he was driven mad. This was the only way. Lin Jin put down the white jade pill in his hand and picked up a fiery red pill. Red represented fire. Lin Jin thought that this might be a unique pill with a fire attribute. It should be effective on Xiaohua. But when he picked it up and sniffed it, a pungent smell wafted over. Lin Jin felt dizzy and almost fainted. If it weren't for the sudden boost from the Devil Blood Beast, Lin Jin would have passed out from the impact. Could this be a poisonous pill? Lin Jin looked horrified as he hurriedly tossed the pill away. This possibility was extremely high. What was the Grand Supreme Elder doing? Why didn't he even distinguish the poisonous pill? Wasn't he afraid that the poison in the pill would seep out and contaminate the other pills? One had to know that these were all immortal pills that were worth cities. Sure enough, having a high cultivation level makes one capricious. Lin Jin mumbled to himself. With so many pills in front of him, he was no longer in a hurry. The sea of pills wasn't going anywhere, so Lin Jin wasn't in a hurry to retrieve them. His top priority now was to find a celestial golden pill. That was the most important thing. Lin Jin didn't have to use the heaven and earth furnace, but the celestial golden pill was a must. The butterfly demoness and the other immortals were still searching around. Previously, Lin Jin felt that finding the celestial golden pill would be like searching for a needle in a haystack if he was alone. But now, it seemed like even with help, the difficulty was about the same. After all, there weren't many celestial golden pills, and they were all mixed up in the sea of pills. If there were more pills that looked similar in appearance, finding the celestial golden pill would be even more difficult. It's all right. I have plenty of time now. Lin Jin comforted himself. If push came to shove, there were other places where he could find the celestial golden pill. However, Lin Jin knew that this place must have it too. It was just a matter of finding it. As time passed, no one brought back any good news. The expressions on the faces of all the people who were searching for pills changed from the relaxed expressions at the beginning to the current solemn expressions, and even expressions of disbelief. How is this possible? Why can't we find it? Could it be that there isn't a single celestial golden pill in the entire sea of pills? That's impossible. Although the celestial golden pill is rare, what is this place? This is the Grand Supreme Elder's Sea of Pills, and the celestial golden pill was refined by the Grand Supreme Elder. How could there not be one? Keep looking. They did find a bunch of pills that could extend an immortal's lifespan, but the celestial golden pill was nowhere to be found. During this time, Lin Jin had collected quite a number of pills, including the longevity pill. There were pills of various qualities, ranging from 10 to 100 to 500 years of life. Any one of these pills would be priceless treasures in any of Middle Earth's continents. But here, Lin Jin managed to find more than 100 of them. Other than that, Lin Jin had also found some other pills. They had all been screened, and Lin Jin was cautious, afraid that he would pick up a poisonous pill and treat it as a treasure. However, even poisonous pills had their uses. It was just that Lin Jin couldn't use them right now. I found it. At this moment, an immortal shouted out with a tone of excitement. How could he not be excited? He had been searching for several hours, and now that he had finally found one, of course he was happy. Upon hearing this, Lin Jin perked up and hurried over. The others followed suit. But just then, a loud rumble came from the bottom of the pellet ocean. A green object rushed out and swallowed the celestial golden pill along with hundreds of other pills around it. Everyone was dumbfounded, their mouths agape. Lin Jin reacted the quickest. After it, as soon as he said that, the 100-beast monster that had been following behind Lin Jin was the first to rush over. It was extremely fast, but the green object wasn't slow either. It dived into the sea of pills like a fish in the ocean, disappearing without a trace. The reason why it was described as a fish returning to the sea was because the green thing just now was indeed a fish, a big fish. Lin Jin's fingers were trembling in anger. It wasn't easy finding a celestial golden pill, but it was snatched away halfway. No one will be able to tolerate this, especially since this was of utmost importance to Lin Jin. Without the celestial golden pill, Xiaohu wouldn't be able to advance to rank 8, so he had to get his hands on this. Come out, Lin Jin bellowed. Then, the breeze sword flew out from his waist and pierced into the sea of pills. Everyone outside fell silent. After all, even if the other immortals wanted to help, they couldn't. They didn't know what that green fish was, but it treated the Pills Sea as a real ocean. When it leaped out of the sea earlier, it was as if it was in the ocean. It was so fast that no one could react in time. After a moment of silence, the sea of pills surged and the sky changed color. Then, a sharp blade flew back into the scabbard at Lin Jin's waist. Chapter 769. It was killed. Lin Jin stared at the breeze monster's sword that had flown back. For a moment, he had no idea what had happened. But since there was no smell of blood on the blade, it must have failed. That large green fish was obviously extremely cunning and familiar with the terrain, so it managed to escape. The other immortals gathered around as well. Mr. Lin, we can't find any Sky Luo golden pills in this pill ocean. The only one we found was eaten by that strange fish, the immortal said dejectedly. He had wanted to use this opportunity to prove himself, but he couldn't even find a single pill. It's not just the Sky Luo golden pills. Although there are countless pills here, there's no sign of any supreme-grade pills. In other words, the other supreme-grade pills might have been eaten by that strange fish, another immortal who was more observant said. Lin Jin had taken a closer look earlier. That large green fish had indeed come for the Sky Luo golden pills. Hence, since there were no other Sky Luo golden pills here, it was possible that the fish had swallowed them all. What should he do now? Although the pills here were as boundless as the ocean, the Sky Luo golden pill that Lin Jin needed the most couldn't be found. Should he just give up and search elsewhere? But he might not be able to find it elsewhere. Lin Jin couldn't decide what to do. At this point, the value of the other immortals became apparent. Some of them were old monsters who had lived for thousands of years and were extremely knowledgeable. They stepped forward and suggested that they might know the origin of this large green fish. It was said that after Old Lord accumulated pills for tens of thousands of years, the sea of pills gave birth to a pill spirit. Some also said that Old Lord caught this strange fish from the chaotic border and that it fed on pills. And because it had eaten too many immortal pills, the medicinal effects had seeped into its bones and blood. Its flesh and bones were just like immortal pills, able to unleash great effects. Simply put, they should catch that large green fish first. Lin Jin planned to do just that. Moreover, there might be other Sky Luo golden pills in this pill ocean. Why not continue searching? Whether they found the fish or the pills, it didn't matter. They had the advantage in numbers, so this shouldn't be too difficult. At Lin Jin's command, the immortals immediately controlled their pet beasts to search around. Lin Jin let Xiao Hu out to search on his own. If he found the Tianluo golden elixir, he would swallow it directly. If he found the big green fish, it would be fine if the other party surrendered. If not, he would swallow it directly. Xiao Hu's characteristics were different. Even if there were toxins, wouldn't be afraid. That black carp had just swallowed the Tianluo golden elixir, so there would definitely be residual medicinal effects. If Xiao Hu swallowed it, it would be equivalent to eating a Tianluo golden elixir. For a moment, the inside of the Dan Sea was in a mess. It could be said to be an overturning of rivers and seas. Countless pills were lifted up and then fell back down. It was as if a poor thief had entered a rich household. At this moment, the immortals in front of them suddenly shuddered, as though they had seen something unbelievable. Their faces were filled with disbelief. The other immortals were curious. What did you see? Why do you all have such an expression? The immortal who had spoken laughed as he walked over. In the end, it was as if he had been struck by lightning. His smile froze on his face, and he, too, was rendered speechless. It was fine if it was just one immortal, but all of them had the same expression. Clearly, what they saw was too shocking. Otherwise, these old monsters who had lived for thousands of years wouldn't be so scared. Lin Jin teleported over as well. Then, he saw a rock in a corner of the pellet sea. It looked like a reef in the sea. And on this rock sat an old man. He looked ordinary and wore a straw hat. He sat cross-legged and held a fishing rod in his hand. He was fishing. While it was a strange scene, it wasn't enough to scare the immortals this much. This old man was clearly not as simple as he seemed. The problem lay with him. Look again. The old man looked ordinary, and there was no trace of immortal aura on him. In other words, he was immortal. This was strange. In the Nine-Heaven realm, There was actually an old mortal man fishing above the Dan Sea in Old Lord's pellet room. This was indeed a strange scene. But no matter how strange it wasn't enough to scare the immortals into silence. After a moment's thought, Lin Jin ignored the others and rode his cloud over. Xiaohua followed beside him, also staring at the old man. If the old man made a move, Xiaohua would react immediately. After getting closer, Lin Jin observed carefully. But the old man didn't even lift his head. Instead, he gestured for Lin Jin to keep quiet. "Sure, the fish is taking a bait." The old man's voice was extremely soft. Speaking of which, it was strange that Lin Jin subconsciously became cautious, afraid of startling the fish. Of course, Lin Jin wasn't being controlled by some evil spell. He just had a vague guess at the old man's identity. Lin Jin looked at the old man's fishing rod. It looked like an ordinary bamboo rod, but there was a unique aura emanating from it. It was clearly an immortal's artifact. Apart from that, the old man's bottom was also covered in unusual material. His clothes and the straw hat he was wearing were also extraordinary. It could be said that other than the fact that this old man was immortal, none of the items he was using were ordinary. Moreover, how could he be a commoner if he could fish here? Lin Jin walked over and sat down, watching quietly. The other immortals didn't dare to move. This old man clearly held a high position in their eyes. Their cautiousness was ingrained in their bones. Lin Jin, on the other hand, wasn't the least bit reserved even after guessing the old man's identity. At most, he was just curious. And so, the scene instantly fell silent. With so many people watching the old man fish, no one dared to move. They didn't even dare to make a sound. After a moment of silence, there seemed to be some movement under the sea. It was as if something was swimming underneath, swirling around the spot where the old man's fishing rod landed. It was as if a large fish was testing the bait. The old man's eyes glinted with excitement as he tightened his grip on the fishing rod. In the next moment, the fishing line suddenly tightened, and the fishing rod was also pulled downwards like a bow. "It's taken a bait." The old man laughed heartily and began pulling forcefully. The next instant, a large black fish was forcefully pulled out of the sea. Lin Jin glanced over. Wasn't this the large black fish that swallowed the sky luo golden pill? The old man had caught it. Lin Jin was dumbfounded. "What are you spacing out for? Hurry up and help." Lin Jin snapped out of his daze at the old man's shout. The group of immortals reacted even faster than Lin Jin as they hurried over to help. The old man then pulled forcefully and the mackerel was pulled over. Then, as if by magic, it shrunk to the size of an average mackerel and landed in a bucket beside the old man. Lin Jin looked at Lin Jin with a look of disbelief. There was water in the bucket, and the black fish was swimming inside. It was hard to imagine that this palm-sized thing was actually the 10-meter-long black fish from before. Now that the old man had caught a large black fish, Lin Jin got up and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, old lord, the common man Lin Jin." Chapter 770. There weren't many people in this world who could make Lin Jin bow to them in such a respectful manner, but Old Lord was definitely one of them. Ever since Lin Jin was studying, he had treated Old Lord as his idol. Also, among the immortals, the old man was highly regarded as a highly respected elder. This was why Lin Jin was so respectful. Had it been any other immortal with a history of evil, Lin Jin wouldn't have bothered with them no matter how old they were. Old Lord laughed heartily and sized Lin Jin up before nodding. "What good mortal? Haha, I'm also a mortal, even if I'm much older than you. I can't compare to a junior like you." As he spoke, he glanced at Xiaohua with a look of admiration. Then, he turned to the immortals with their various pet beasts and nodded as well. "Not bad, not bad. It's not bad that you're willing to let go of your immortal cultivation. You're much better than some stubborn people." This old man was obviously the most experienced immortal cultivator and might even be the ancestor of immortals, Old Lord. He had also become immortal. However, he didn't walk the path of a fragmented immortal. He must have used some other method, but outsiders didn't know about it. As Lin Jin and Old Lord conversed, The other immortals were nervous and reserved. They couldn't help it. Old Lord's status was too high, especially to these immortals. Old Lord's status was even higher than that on Immortal Emperor. Even after such a long time, they still felt nervous whenever they saw Old Lord. Don't be so reserved. We're all mortals now, and there are no longer the immortal rules of the past, Old Lord said. At this moment, the Grand Supreme Elder said, "Furthermore, in the past 2,000 years, you are the first batch of people to come here. I am very satisfied to be able to accompany me and talk." Although that was what he said, it was obvious that everyone was so respectful and even in awe of him. The Grand Supreme Elder also enjoyed it very much. It was probably as he had said, no one had spoken to him for 2,000 years, and he did not have a group of followers like in the past. It was indeed lonely. Although Old Lord had become immortal, he still had his discerning eyes. From his observation of the warehouse supervisor, judge, and other immortals, he could tell that these immortals were using a forceful method to destroy their immortal cultivation. But doing so was too dangerous, and there was an 80 to 90% chance that he would be seeking his own death. Even if he lost his cultivation, he wouldn't be able to keep his life. The old Supreme Elder was very clear about this because he had studied this for a long time. However, these people were not dead. Not only did they not die, but there seemed to be a special power strengthening their bodies. At first, the Old Lord could not understand, but when he saw the immortal beast beside these people, he seemed to understand. Your method is quite amazing. To think that you can borrow the immortal beast's power to enhance yourself. Using external support like this is a brilliant technique, especially in a situation like this. Elderly Lord stroked his beard before turning to Lin Jin. Little friend, if I'm not wrong, this method of controlling immortal beasts came from you, right? Lin Jin nodded. There was no need to hide this. At this, Old Lord continued. Actually, when the immortal emperor stirred up trouble, I already knew that the path of immortals was in danger. However, I thought that after hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, the path of immortals would at least be able to protect itself. I thought it would just be a change of dynasties at most, but I didn't expect things to turn out this way. The immortal devouring beast evolved from the heavenly path's cornerstone was indeed powerful. Even the immortal emperor couldn't withstand it and was defeated. Recalling the past, Old Lord looked up at the sky in silence. No one spoke. Other than Lin Jin, everyone here had experienced that revolution. It could be said that to the path of immortals, it was the end of the world, a calamity. At that time, I held back my cultivation and wanted to resist for a while to give the other juniors a chance to escape. However, the immortal devouring beast was too powerful. Even if I tried my best, I could only resist for half a day. The Old Lord's face was filled with shame and helplessness. However, Lin Jin and the other immortals were shocked to hear this. They had all witnessed the immortal devouring beast's strength. It was so powerful that even a true immortal wouldn't be able to withstand it and would be killed instantly. Even the immortal emperor died in its hands, but Old Lord was able to hold it off for half a day. What was there to be ashamed of? That was something to be proud of. It could be said that Old Lord was the ceiling of immortals, an existence that stood at the peak of all immortals. Immortal Emperor, probably not as good as Old Lord. What happened after that? Lin Jin was curious, and so were the other immortals. The Grand Supreme Elder smiled. In the end, I was naturally defeated. However, I've cultivated for a long time after all, and I've lived a few years longer than others, so I have some special methods to protect myself. However, it's impossible for me to compete with that immortal devouring beast again. After a pause, Old Lord sighed. Later on, I found out that the immortal devouring beast was targeting the immortal's aura. So, I used an immortal vanquishing pill to destroy my own immortal's aura. This was said casually, but one could imagine that Old Lord wouldn't have made up his mind so easily back then. Others couldn't bear to give up their hundreds or thousands of years of cultivation. So how could Old Lord give up his hundreds of thousands of years of cultivation so easily? Definitely not. But Old Lord could see the situation. If he didn't give up his cultivation, the immortal devouring beast would definitely track him down. Moreover, he was already injured in the previous battle, damaging his immortal foundation. He couldn't possibly compete with the immortal devouring beast anymore. Hence, Old Lord's decisiveness back then was out of helplessness. After destroying the immortal's aura, I'll stay in this pill ocean and think of a way to break it. Old Lord glanced at the black carp in his bucket. I've been meditating for 100 years. I thought that if immortals can't be tolerated in this world, they should be replaced by beasts. That's why I created this big fish. After Old Lord said this, it was Lin Jin's turn to be shocked. This big black carp was actually Old Lord's creation. If that was the case, this black carp definitely wasn't as simple as it seemed. Lin Jin immediately bowed at Old Lord. Old Lord, can I touch this black carp? Old Lord smiled and gestured for Lin Jin to do as he pleased. Lin Jin immediately reached his hand into the water. The next instant, Lin Jin felt as if his hand had reached into a vast ocean, almost dragging him into it. This bucket was clearly not as simple as it seemed. Fortunately, Lin Jin was no ordinary person. He couldn't extend his arms, but he had silver needles that could be used as extensions. Thus, a silver needle shot out like a bolt of lightning. It traveled thousands of feet into the sea and finally came into contact with a large green fish. In an instant, the Museum of Deadly Beasts displayed the evaluation results of this large green carp. Lin Jin was shocked by what he saw. A rank 8 immortal beast. This black carp was actually a rank 8 immortal beast. This was something Lin Jin didn't expect. Chapter 771. A rank 8 immortal beast was equivalent to a carefree immortal. If the green carp had been hostile and tried to attack him, he might have died without even knowing how. It was no wonder that the Qing Feng demon sword's pursuit was fruitless. It was because the cultivation of this big green carp was much higher than his. Lin Jin felt a lingering fear. Now, it seemed like the green carp was a glutton at best, but it was actually quite gentle. It wasn't a tyrannical and wild immortal beast. The other immortals obviously didn't know how powerful the green carp was, so they didn't feel the same way Lin Jin did. Instead, Old Lord noticed a change in Lin Jin's expression and seemed to have thought of something. Young friend Lin, was what you used just now a beast appraisal technique? Because Lin Jin had told Old Lord about beast appraisals before, the old man asked. Lin Jin nodded. Old Lord then asked about the green carp. Old Lord had never mentioned this before, but Lin Jin answered him fluently. This piqued Old Lord's interest. Young friend Lin, your beast evaluation skills are truly amazing. Would you mind teaching me? Old Lord's words made the immortal's hearts pound. This was the founder of immortality, and he was asking Mr. Lin for guidance? Unbelievable. This was simply unbelievable. However, this also proved that Mr. Lin was indeed extraordinary. They didn't follow the wrong person. Lin Jin had purposely answered fluently because he wanted Old Lord to say this. This way, he could bargain with him. Lin Jin didn't say anything but summoned Xiao Hua for Old Lord to take a closer look. Old Lord, please take a look at this pet beast of mine, Lin Jin said. Xiao Hua walked over obediently. The Old Lord had been curious about this fire wolf for a long time now. Now he was carefully inspecting it and marveling at it. He was originally a normal person, but he was able to reach true celestial realm. This is just like touching stone to gold. Little friend Lin, your pet beast is really amazing. Old Lord praised. Lin Jin smiled. To tell you the truth, Old Lord, the reason I've come to the Nine Heavens world and even disturbed Old Lord's cultivation is to find an evolution method for my pet beast. I have the method, but I lack the support of precious resources. Having said that, Lin Jin glanced at the gigantic mackerel that was swimming happily. The Old Lord was smart. He had been observing Lin Jin and the others for a long time and knew that they were looking for the Sky Luo golden pill. He laughed and handed a porcelain bottle to Lin Jin. There are 5 Tian Luo golden pills inside. If you don't have enough, you can ask me for more. You won't be able to find it in the pill sea. My black carp likes to eat this kind of pill the most. The Grand Supreme Elder was indeed generous. He gave 5 pills at once. It should be noted that this was the Empyrean golden pill. It could be said that other than Old Lord himself, no one could reactivate the furnace. Although this matter was a little difficult for the current Old Supreme Elder, this deal could be done and had to be done. Young friend Lin, I'll help you light up the furnace and refine your pet beast. Tell me the mackerel's evolution method, Old Lord said seriously. Lin Jin nodded. Old Lord didn't ask if the method was real or fake. To him, it shouldn't be fake. Lin Jin was indeed capable. Even if it was fake, Old Lord would admit it and not pursue the matter, because the mackerel would probably have to rely on Lin Jin for her evolution. They got up and rode a cloud outside. Before them was the massive furnace. Old Lord's robes fluttered and his beard swayed. He took out an immortal talisman, cut his finger, and softly chanted, "Go!" Then Old Lord tossed the immortal talisman out. The talisman instantly transformed into the shape of a large bell. Dong! The melodious sound of the bell rang. The next instant, countless fireballs came flying from all directions. Lin Jin's eyes widened. Upon closer inspection, those weren't fireballs. They were all golden crows. Golden crows were rare immortal beasts. They were born with blazing suns. It was said that this blazing sun in the sky was a manifestation of the ancient golden crow. Flames as hot as the sun. This was the golden crow's supernatural power. At that moment, the countless golden crows flew over and rushed into the furnace. In an instant, the cold and dark furnace burst into flames and was reactivated. At the same time, a wave of heat washed over them. It was a spectacular sight. It was as if a dead star had suddenly been lit up. Lin Jin gaped at the sight, unable to say a word. Chapter 772. Little friend Lin, hurry up with whatever you want to concoct. The reactivation of this heaven and earth pill furnace might trigger some unpredictable events. You'd better hurry up. Otherwise, I'm afraid something might happen if you delay. The Old Lord said solemnly. Lin Jin had no idea what Old Lord meant by things might go awry, but judging from Old Lord's expression, he didn't seem to be joking. Lin Jin immediately reacted and quickly fed an Empyrean golden pill to Xiao Hua before instructing him to rush into the furnace. Lin Jin had already buried the purple Thunder Divine needle inside Xiao Hua's body. Once Xiao Hua was inside the heaven and earth furnace, Lin Jin would have to perform his trick inside. With the help of the celestial golden pill and the heaven and earth furnace, Xiao Hua's advancement to rank 8 was almost certain. Xiao Hua was excited too. He transformed into a ball of flame and dove into the furnace. Lin Jin closed his eyes and sat down cross-legged, beginning the spirit-casting needle. Lin Jin had already gathered all the prerequisites for Xiao Hua's evolution method given by the pet beast. Now that he had the assistance of the heaven and earth furnace, he was confident he could succeed this time. It was a spectacular scene. The heaven and earth furnace was operating at full force as if a blazing sun was right before them, emitting a blinding brilliance and heat. The surrounding clouds began to recede, rolling away like waves in a sea of clouds. The immortals who came with Lin Jin felt the unbearable heat and could only use their pet beast to withstand it. If they couldn't, they could only retreat. By now, they had retreated 1,000 feet away and were still retreating. Only Lin Jin and Old Lord remained calm. Even though they were all mortals, the difference in strength was like night and day. Lin Jin was finally able to divert his attention. He was curious about what Old Lord meant by something bad might happen, so he couldn't resist asking. Just as Old Lord was about to speak, he suddenly saw a massive dark cloud drifting toward them. In a breath's time, it was about to reach them. That's what you wanted to ask. Old Lord's expression was solemn, as if a great enemy had arrived. Lin Jin studied the rolling darkness and saw a figure standing among the dark clouds. This person was dressed in black robes and had an evil glint in his eyes. His aura was eerie. This wasn't human, nor was it a monster, nor was it an immortal. It looked familiar. Lin Jin turned to look at Old Lord, then at that thing. Both of them looked exactly the same. Clearly, there was a story behind this. However, this wasn't the time to ask questions. The old lord had already rushed towards the heaven and earth pill furnace. "Don't let him enter the furnace," old lord shouted. Even without his reminder, Lin Jin knew that he couldn't let the man enter the furnace. No one was allowed. Now was the crucial time for Xiao Hua to advance to the 8th level. So how could he allow anyone to disturb him? Lin Jin would fight anyone who dared to cause trouble. With a thought, the 100 Beasts monster charged forward like a bolt of lightning, blocking the black-robed old man. The 100 Beasts monster was the strongest of the 6th level. In other words, it was the strongest of the pseudo-immortals. Even if it were to go up against a true immortal level expert, it would still be able to put up a fight. In fact, it might even be able to do so without fear. However, against the black-robed old lord, it only took a moment for him to retreat. Clearly, the black-robed old man was very powerful. Fortunately, Lin Jin had more tricks up his sleeves. The clear wind demon sword also flew over with a wave of sword chi, cooperating with the 100 Beasts to fight against the black-robed Elder Supreme Lord. To be on the safe side, Lin Jin even released his ghostly blood beast clone, bringing the spirit-devouring ghost bug along with it. With this, it was now a 3-on-1 battle. Old Lord wasn't idle either. He took out a chess piece from his pocket. The word army was written on it. "Go!" Old Lord casually tossed the army chess piece out. With a golden flash in midair, the army landed on the ground in the form of a 9-foot-tall soldier clad in golden armor and wielding a long sword. This soldier was similar to casting beans into soldiers. It was a manifestation of a spell. Despite being a golden-armored soldier, it wasn't weak at all. From what Lin Jin could see, it was definitely stronger than most hollow immortals. Now it was 4 against 1. This was a balance. Lin Jin could tell that the black-robed Elder Supreme Lord wasn't that strong, so he calmed down a little. However, since the man looked so similar to Old Lord, there must be something going on. "Old Lord, this is—" Lin Jin suddenly asked. "Back then, when I was refining pellets, I accidentally got distracted and ruined a cauldron of pills. After thinking about it for 7 days, I realized that I was affected by an inner demon, so I forced it out and killed it. To think that this inner demon, despite its mediocre cultivation level, was immortal. Even I couldn't kill it. Hence, after every pellet refinement session, this inner demon would come and cause trouble out of resentment. This time, the furnace hasn't been opened for more than 1,000 years, so I thought it wouldn't come again." After a pause, he added, "But young friend Lin, don't take it to heart. It's just a small problem. In the past, I could crush it with one finger." Lin Jin was even more concerned after hearing his words. "What about now?" "Now?" Old Lord was stunned before replying. "Of course not now. I'm just immortal now. Although I still have some tricks up my sleeves, I can't do anything to it anymore. To be honest, I'm surprised that this immortal devouring beast hasn't devoured it yet. It's inexplicable." Lin Jin understood now. The reason why Old Lord hadn't opened the furnace for nearly 2,000 years and even put out the fire was because of this. Although Old Lord didn't seem to feel guilty and behaved normally, why did Lin Jin feel like he'd been tricked by Old Lord? Inexplicable? The immortal devouring beast wanted to kill immortals. This inner demon wasn't an immortal, so the beast obviously wouldn't pay attention to it. Also, when Old Lord was still an immortal, his cultivation level was definitely no weaker than an immortal emperor. If even he couldn't kill this inner demon, it must have reached the pinnacle of the term immortal body. To put it more bluntly, when the Grand Supreme Elder's cultivation was extremely high, he could not do anything to his inner demon. He could only cut it off, drive it away, and kill it again and again. However, the inner demon came back again and again, and there was nothing he could do. Now that the Grand Supreme Elder had become immortal, he could not do anything to his inner demon. It was no wonder Old Lord said that things might change if he delayed. But even if he was tricked by Old Lord, Lin Jin would accept it. Moreover, he couldn't retreat now, nor could he back down. Xiao Hua was at a critical juncture. Forget one inner demon. Even if there were 100, Lin Jin wouldn't hold back. Since I can't kill it, I won't kill it. Let's freeze it for now. With a plan in mind, Lin Jin flipped his hand and took out the demon slayer from the museum. This weapon was rarely used. It had been used to slay a few obsession demons before being used to seal zombies who had turned into demons in the painting realm. It could be said that this weapon was specially used to deal with grindheads. Old Lord's inner demon was powerful, and he had an immortal body. However, Lin Jin had no intention of killing him. Just as he said, he would freeze it for now and wait for Xiaohua to finish his evolution. Chapter 773. With the demon slayer in hand, Lin Jin waited for the right moment and tossed it out. Beside him, Old Lord could tell what Lin Jin was planning. With his keen eyes, Old Lord noticed the uniqueness of Lin Jin's demon slayer, so he handed Lin Jin a sword amulet to assist him in casting the spell. Without hesitation, Lin Jin took the sword amulet and infused it with mana. In an instant, Lin Jin felt a telepathic connection between him and the demon slayer. It was a wonderful feeling. With a flick of his finger, the demon slayer's speed increased by several times. Almost instantaneously, it pierced through the void, and while Old Lord's inner demon was unprepared, it pierced through his chest and nailed him to the wall of the furnace. The scorching flames instantly engulfed the inner demon. However, the heart demon had an undying body, so no matter how the flames burned, they were unable to burn it to ashes. However, the heart demon could not escape either. After being pierced by the demon-slaying sword, it was unable to move at all. It could only be continuously burned by the flames and reborn, suffering endless pain. It let out a heart-wrenching scream, but Lin Jin and Old Lord only smiled at each other. Friend Lin, this sword is interesting. It's not an immortal sword, and it doesn't have the sharpness to slash through heaven and earth. Yet, it can suppress demons. How interesting. Can you lend it to me for research some other day? Old Lord had probably never seen such a treasure before, so he wanted to study it. Lin Ji nodded. This wasn't a big deal. If Xiaohua really managed to evolve to rank 8, borrowing a sword would be a piece of cake. Of course, Old Lord didn't just want to borrow it for research. He probably wanted to use this sword to see if it could completely eradicate that undying inner demon of his. Right now, the demon-slaying sword had already immobilized the Grand Supreme Elder's inner demon and caused it to be repeatedly burned by the flames on the cauldron of heaven and earth. Perhaps the inner demon would perish today. After that, Lin Jin and Old Lord chatted merrily for quite a while. Lin Jin also told him a little about blood contracts. Old Lord was a formidable figure. With just a few words from Lin Jin, Old Lord was already familiar with the art of blood contracts. He even used a special method to perfect it before putting it into practice. The Old Lord directly used the blood contract technique and successfully formed a blood contract with the big green fish. Then, he made a hand seal and a green light flew out. The big green fish actually became huge in the air. Its body was more than 10,000 feet long, and it could swim in the sky without water. It was only at this moment that it displayed the might of a rank 8 immortal beast. The Grand Supreme Elder had a lot of fun learning the blood pact technique. Furthermore, he learned the technique to enhance himself through the power of the blood pact very quickly. Ordinary people would need at least a few months to understand the key points and familiarize themselves with it. However, the Grand Supreme Elder had completed it in the blink of an eye. Not only that, but the Grand Supreme Elder also changed his hand seal and chanted, "Black Carp transforms into a dragon." In the next moment, azure light surged on the body of the huge green fish, and its body continued to grow. Sharp claws grew out of its head, and in the blink of an eye, the huge green fish had turned into an azure dragon that was over 1,000 feet long. Haha, interesting. Let's do another lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. The Grand Supreme Elder was like a child who had just found a new toy. His eyes lit up as he raised his hand and pointed. What happened next made Lin Jin's scalp tingle. The green dragon was already huge enough, but after the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, the green dragon's body grew 10 times larger. Anyway, it was indescribable with words because Lin Jin could no longer see the green dragon's full form. At this moment, Lin Jin felt like he was looking at a rank 9 immortal devouring beast. Although Old Lord's green dragon was still slightly inferior to a rank 9 immortal devouring beast, it was very close. A rank 8 immortal beast was truly impressive. In particular, Old Lord's spells were superb. Although he wasn't an immortal and couldn't cast various top-notch spells, he could use them through the blood contract technique and this pet beast. In other words, this was no different from when Old Lord was an immortal. It was no wonder that Old Lord was having so much fun that he couldn't stop. Let's swallow the moon. Old Lord was relentless. The huge green dragon's unbelievably huge body began to ascend. It opened its mouth and swallowed a star from the 9 heavens. He really swallowed it. Then, the green dragon swam into the void, shuttling between different planets. The scene was thrilling and Lin Jin's mouth was wide open, unable to say a word. As for the other immortals, they weren't much stronger than Lin Jin. They were also hiding in the distance, shuddering in fear. They had more to consider. For example, what if this thing caused some trouble? Or what if the immortal devouring beast was alarmed? That would be bad. However, some of them mused that Old Lord's green dragon might already have the ability to compete with the immortal devouring beast. If they could get rid of the immortal devouring beast, the path of immortality might be revived. At this thought, they couldn't help but feel excited. Their eyes were filled with the color of a chessboard. Lin Jin had thought of this as well. Lightning enchantment. Old Lord continued to cast an advanced immortal spell. But in the next moment, the sky changed color. A bestial roar resounded through the 9 heavens. Lin Jin's expression changed instantly, while Old Lord's expression froze. The other immortals shuddered in fear. In the endless sea of clouds in the distance, the shadow of a huge beast gradually appeared. In the end, he was still alarmed. Lin Jin felt his scalp go numb as a sense of danger crept over him. Needless to say, Elder Supreme Lord's impulsive actions had alarmed the immortal devouring beast. Now that it was here, no one knew what would happen next. "Don't move," Elder Supreme Lord said with a solemn expression. It was clearly his fault this time. At the same time, Elder Supreme Lord got up slowly, picked up the bucket, and looked at the beast's head that had appeared in the distance. If the beast made any other moves, Elder Supreme Lord would have to transform into a dragon again and fight with his life on the line. The immortal devouring beast's head was massive and only a small part of it was revealed. Only one of its eyes was revealed and it was looking at Elder Supreme Lord, Lin Jin, and the others. The reason why it didn't attack immediately was because the immortal devouring beast hadn't sensed the immortal's aura. However, this kind of confrontation was even more nerve-wracking. The terrifying pressure was indescribable. Everyone, including Lin Jin, dared not breathe too loudly. Even Elder Supreme Lord was sweating profusely. But unlike before, Elder Supreme Lord now had a hint of confidence. His rank 8 green carp could transform into a dragon and gather the power of the 5 elements under the enhancement of spell. Its combat strength was comparable to when he was at the peak of his immortal cultivation. In fact, it might even be stronger. This was where Elder Supreme Lord's confidence came from. But just as Lin Jin had said, the difference of 1 rank was like heaven and earth. If they fought now, they would definitely lose. However, Elder Supreme Lord knew that he couldn't hide because he was the one who caused this trouble, so he had to be the one to solve it. If push came to shove, he would have to fight them head-on. After all, he couldn't just sit around and wait for death. Elder Supreme Lord was already prepared to die, while the other immortals wore expressions of despair. Under the gaze of the immortal devouring beast, they didn't even have the courage to run. They couldn't resist this kind of pressure at all. As if their bodies were filled with lead, they couldn't even move a finger. The rank 9 beast's aura had already shaken the entire place. This was a one-sided massacre because whenever the immortal devouring beast appeared, it would always be a one-sided massacre. There were no exceptions. It was the same even if it was against a former immortal emperor. Of course, no one wanted to fight the immortal devouring beast right now. They all hoped that the beast would leave on its own, but it seemed unlikely. Chapter 775. Lin Jin looked pleased with himself. His precautionary measures had finally come in handy, and the results were excellent. The situation earlier was dangerous, and Lin Jin was afraid too, especially since Xiaohua was at the critical juncture of his advancement to rank 8. He couldn't afford to be disturbed. Fortunately, this move worked. Otherwise, Lin Jin wouldn't know what to do. At this, Old Lord praised Lin Jin profusely. Even though the other immortals were a distance away, they were still impressed by Lin Jin. This man had clearly studied immortal devourer beasts thoroughly and knew their characteristics, so he could make arrangements in advance. If they were in his shoes, they wouldn't have expected this and they wouldn't know what to do. Even though they were lucky enough to escape, everyone knew that it was only a temporary escape. No matter what the immortal devouring beast was lured away by, it would most likely return. Hence, they had to leave as soon as possible. Old Lord knew this, and so did Lin Jin. All of you, leave for now, Lin Jin said decisively to the immortals in the distance. They might be able to deal with ordinary immortal beasts and enemies, but they were useless against an immortal devouring beast. Instead of that, it was better to let them leave first. Upon hearing this, Old Lord looked at Lin Jin with approval. While it wasn't rare to see Old Lord being able to let bystanders leave in the face of danger, not everyone possessed this kind of magnanimity. In particular, some people knew they couldn't leave, so they wouldn't let others leave either. Old Lord had seen this kind of overbearing attitude many times before. The immortals were touched. They were so excited that they didn't want to leave, but Lin Jin insisted. They knew that once the immortal devouring beast returned, they wouldn't even be enough to fill the gaps between its teeth. Among them, the judge was more agreeable. He said, "That immortal devouring beast is only concerned about this place. It might even just be the heaven and earth pill cauldron." Because just now, the immortal devouring beast was also looking at the heaven and earth pill cauldron. In that case, Mr. Lin, leaving with us is the best plan. The other immortals agreed as well. The magistrate was right, but little did he know that Lin Jin couldn't let go of this opportunity. After this village, it would be difficult to find another opportunity that could guarantee Xiaohua's advancement to rank 8. He might never see it again. Therefore, Lin Jin couldn't leave no matter what, at least not before Xiaohua evolved. Seeing this, the immortals knew that they wouldn't be of any use if they stayed. Instead, they would only add to the chaos. Hence, they bowed to Lin Jin and Old Lord before leaving together. Old Lord can leave too, Lin Jin said when he saw that the pill furnace no longer needed anyone to control it. The Grand Supreme Elder shook his head. Chapter 777. Throughout their search, other than God Yin, the other villainous immortals they found were too weak. None of them were at the level of a true immortal. And now, they needed a true immortal to deal with Lin Jin. There must be something going on down there. If God Yin died down there, it wouldn't be wise to waste his treasures. Let's go down and take a look. The Beast God's cult leader was in low spirits. Previously, he had the upper hand. Who would have thought that because he wanted to deal with Lin Jin, all his experts would perish and he would be the only one left? Hence, the Beast God's cult leader hated two people the most. One was obviously Lin Jin, and the other was Patriarch Shui Pao. However, he still had to rely on Patriarch Shui Pao. Hence, the beast god's cult leader was in low spirits. Upon hearing that they were going down, Patriarch Shui Pao nodded. He had the same intention. Both of them were at the level of true immortals. Although they knew that it would be dangerous down there, they were confident that they could come and go as they pleased. And so, the two of them flew down into the lightning pool. 3 days later, loud noises came from the lightning pool. Then, a murderous aura shot up into the sky, shaking the entire outer realm. A huge spider broke through the hole and crawled out from below. The one controlling the spider was an immortal whose lower body was swallowed by a giant snake. For some reason, the snake only swallowed the lower part of the immortal's body. Then it fused with the immortal, becoming a half-human, half-snake monster. Although the lower half of his body was that of a giant snake, the immortal moved extremely quickly. His upper body was naked, and snake scales could be faintly seen under his skin. His hair was disheveled, and there was an evil vertical eye on his forehead. If Lin Jin was here, he would have recognized this half-human, half-snake monster. It looked very much like a human. God Yin, ha ha ha! The man burst into maniacal laughter after he emerged. His voice sounded menacing. Lin Jin, Monk Hui Yuan, you didn't expect this, did you? God Yin wasn't fated to die. Not only did I not die, but I also benefited from my misfortune by obtaining the sage's inheritance. Today God Yin, will be the day you die. The half-human, half-snake monster was God Yin, who had entered the lightning pool earlier. After Sir God Gu, another person crawled out of the cave. It looked like it was Ancestor Shui Pao. However, at that very moment, Ancestor Shui Pao's face was filled with fear. It was as though he had seen an extremely terrifying scene before. Facing the monster like Sir God Gu, Ancestor Shui Pao was extremely respectful. Divine Lord, I too have a deep grudge against Lin Jin. I'm willing to serve you. This was a show of loyalty. Patriarch Shui Pao had no other choice. He was lucky to be able to survive. The leader of the Beast God Church was not as lucky as him.